All right, so we'll get started. Welcome to our June 23rd, 2020 Club Cubase Google Hangout. My name is Greg Ondo. I'll be the host. So we're going to, if you haven't attended a Hangout before, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that we have audio being fed through. I'll do a quick check here on my end, and we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. We're going to be letting people get logged in. Okay, so let me just check. Okay, so it looks like audio is coming through okay. Okay, so if you haven't attended a Club Cubase Google Hangout, this is basically a live Q&A session. We could ask questions into the live chat field if you're watching this live. If you want to send questions in advance of another Club Cubase Google Hangout, we usually have been doing them since the COVID-19 situation started on Tuesday and Fridays, but you can send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So we'll let people get logged in. If you're watching this on the replay, you may want to skip ahead to about 8 or 10 minutes. Hopefully we'll have a index later tonight of all the questions and topics that were covered in the Hangout. But right now, as I mentioned before, my name is Greg Ondo. I'm presenting from outside Washington, D.C. area in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, and you could ask questions in the comments field. So we'll let people get logged in. So as we do this, people get logged in, but if you want to tell us where you're from and if you have questions, you could enter them in the comments field. And we'll get started here in just a few minutes. Okay, so we had some questions already from before the Hangout. I think I was able to capture some. Okay, so and when you have questions, we try to go through them and answer each question as completely and succinctly as possible. So if you ask the same question, multiple times in the chat field, it really just kind of slows down the whole process. So if we could try to refrain from doing that. And like many of you, I have family at home, so you may hear my wife upstairs on conference calls directly above me in her office, and my son may be interrupting. Right now, he's doing a project, but he may interrupt me to get a movie going for him, so I'll apologize in advance for that. So we have more people getting logged in. Let's see who's part of our Hangout already. So we see Ace Amadeus. Good to see you. All right. So we have Joe from Austin. Okay. So we have Robbie from Dallas. All right. Pablo, who I believe is from Spain. We have Matt from Fort Wayne, Indiana. All right. So we have Helsinki. We have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. It's great to see. I had family, because I went through Pine Grove many times going up there. So family near there. Okay. See that Taylor just upgraded. All right. We have Millard from Pennsylvania. Okay. So we have Jazz Dude from Germany. Okay. Okay, so we have Wisconsin. All right. Ambient Dave, good to see you on a Hangout. All right, so we have York in the UK. All right, so we have Atlanta. All right, so we have Oslo, Norway, El Salvador. All right, so we have Paris, France. We have Colombia, South America. So, all right, so let's see how many continents we can get. All right, so we have Stockholm. So Fort Worth, Texas. Liverpool. All right, someone else from DC, so close by. All right, Sherman Oaks. Good to see Ted on. Okay, more people are getting logged in. Give it a few more minutes. All right, so we have Argentina, Netherlands, India. See, Ambient Dave's going through a bit of a heat wave. Yeah, it just suddenly turned very summer here in the United States and the mid-Atlantic region as well. So, okay, so we have Australia. It's good. It's, I think, very late in Australia. So, Iran. Okay, so it's all right. So we have Chris from Germany. All right, we'll get started here in another minute or two. Thanks for everyone getting logged in. Great to see so many familiar faces. All right, so we have Greece, Sweden, India, from South Shields, England. All right, so Pablo from Spain. All these places I want to visit and travel to. Okay, maybe another 30, 60 seconds and we'll get started. We have more people getting logged in. All right, so Ethiopia. All right, so we hit the African continent. So I think we have every continent represented except for Antarctica. All right, so we see Houston. My brother lives in Houston, so it's usually a pretty hot place in the summer. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we had a couple questions that were kind of sent in the chat field before we got started. So let's see if we get through some of those. So question, hi Greg. Jay from New Haven, Connecticut. Being new to Nuendo, are there ways to trigger audio from video, flashes, transitions, other events to build a framework of audio tempo around visual tempos? All right, so what you can do in Nuendo is, let's say if I have just a video file that I've imported directly into Nuendo, you could select the video file, and then if you go to your project, one of the unique features in Nuendo is a video cut detection panel. So if you open this up, you could have it kind of do, an analysis of your video file, and then at this point have it create markers. So as we look at the video, we can see our different markers here. There's a cut, cut, cut. So we can see kind of different transitions that have been determined by the video. So where there's kind of distinct video edits and cuts. So while it can do that, it may not necessarily automatically generate different parts or, generate information for, to trigger audio. But what you can do is use this as kind of the foundation if you wanted to do like a tempo map. So if I have a tempo map currently here, so I'll add a track, and let's say we have our tempo. And once again, the video cut detection is in Nuendo only. But at this point, we could switch to our time warp tool. I could say measure 9 starts right at that point, and I needed an even number of bars, or so let's say measure 2 starts at that point, and let's say I wanted 4 even bars to go here. And what I could do is I could just move measure 6 and base it on the actual video cut here. So if I wanted 1 measure of data here, and I wanted this to be a measure, you could now just kind of go through here and make even numbers of bars, and that will do the tempo changes for you automatically. So the time warp tool is in both Cubase and Nuendo. But if you've done the video cut detection, I could now come over here. If I turn on a click track, I have the audio set up for it, but at this point you could have a dedicated even number of bars and have it kind of the tempo mapped to the visual cues that were automatically detected by the video cut detection in Nuendo. All right, so those kind of are Nuendo specific questions. So let's jump back to Cubase, and we'll go to our next question here. So says, where can I find a difference between Melodyne, VariAudio 3, and Melodyne Studio? I've looked all over. Do you know the differences? I don't know, Melodyne extremely well. I used to use it before VariAudio came out. I could show you some of the unique things that are in VariAudio. So, if we wanted to do, one of the things is it's kind of actually part of the editing experience. We can do a lot now with ARA2, with like Melodyne, 4 and 5. But as we wanted to come here, some of the unique things that I think make, we have kind of the total integration here within the editing environment. I think that's a bit stronger for VariAudio. So if I wanted to just come here and take all those and snap them, we have different smart controls. At this point, if I wanted to join, 2 different sections together, we can see that the tools will kind of change to like a smart tool. At this point, we could also do different transitions. So if I wanted to see notes that if we have a chord track, we could actually colorize based on chord track. So at this point, I could see notes that are green fall within the chord derived in the chord track itself. Or if we go directly to, so if I move a note out to a red note, we know that that's going to be out of key. So green notes are within the chord, blue notes are within the scale. We could also just control the volume of each individual section. So if I'm just playing, so at that point, if I wanted to, stretch notes out, we could just adjust accordingly. We could adjust our pitch here. So if I wanted to be able to do different functions, some other nice things, if I wanted to adjust, and any change I make here, I have my unlimited undos tied directly in with Cubase. So I still have kind of the same structure for editing. So I could come over here also and just say I wanted to leave the transition between notes, and if I wanted to straighten out vibrato just in the middle part, we could have an anchor point so that we could adjust different pitch changes at specific points. So if someone is drifting flat at the end of particular phrases, I can move this anchor point. And at that point, we could just adjust the pitch directly from that particular point. We also have formant control that we could do, as well as volume control. So if this is just like a really loud breath, we could adjust the volume directly here. Once we have this done, there's also, when you go to your functions menu, you could choose to turn it into MIDI data. And you could actually look at different parts of the song. So let's say if I have my vocal here and I wanted to see a visual reference of, let's say, a MIDI track, I could just kind of come over here and show like a melody part, or we could actually just say, I want to know what chords the piano is playing. And this way I could see exactly what pitches are going on in the piano key as a reference, so we could see exactly which particular notes we're seeing and making sure that those are going to line up with an existing MIDI track. So those are some of the kind of unique things I think in Very Audio that you may not see in other programs as well. So, but I'm not an expert in Melodyne, so I'm probably not the best one to ask about that. Okay, so it says, hi, Greg. Hope you and your family are doing well. Is it possible to detect the tempo of a wave recording of a live bass player and get Groove Agent to follow the tempo of the recording? So yeah, you could do that. You could do it with a bass part or like a full mix. So if I wanted to come, let's say, to this particular part, let me get the right, I'll activate this project here. So as we if I want to do, tempo detection of that particular event, I could come here and just go to my project menu and do tempo detection. And then, if we want to listen to it, so maybe I do an offbeat correction. Then you could just kind of drag and drop anything onto it. And even if you wanted to take, once you have that done, everything will be kind of aligned. But let's say if I even wanted to take like a full mix and add Groove Agent onto a part. So let's say we listen to this and there's no kind of tempo. So the click isn't aligned with the audio event. What I could do is just select it. And let's say if I want to do a tempo detection here. And as we do our tempo detection, let's go ahead. And we'll do a quick offbeat detection. So I've done my tempo detection, and let's find kind of the downbeat. Just going to be right there. So I will just drop in my 4/4 bar right at that point. So we have the tempo map of a bass line or mix. And now I could come over here. Let's get to Groove Agent SE. I could drop this in. And let's say if I just want to do maybe like kind of a funky, or let's say fusion essentials. So let's just try this. This could be awful or really good. So I'll just randomly load up a kit here. And we will synchronize this. I'll just do my pattern. So now I could hit play. This will synchronize, and Groove Agent's going to follow the tempo patterns of. I can can load up a different pattern as well. So if we want to just, so now Groove Agent's just following the tempo based from the jazz piece. So if we unsolo it. So whatever you do, the tempo detection of it will automatically basically just follow that. So, all right, so let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so it says, hi, Greg, Joe from Austin. My studio work involves a lot more .mov and .mp4 files than in the past. Is there a codec or other better way to import them into Cubase 10.5? Thanks for your help. Most people will do, like a ProRes as a container and like, an H.264 codec. So those are probably the most common, and there's a number of freeware utilities that you could convert that to. And there's a whole, if you look for kind of video support for, Cubase, Nuendo, Wavelab, and Dorico, there's a whole web page of which codec and container will work for different things. So, I think once you figure out, if you can make it like a ProRes H.264 file, which is pretty common, that you could, just get a shareware or freeware file converter utility, and then, just have that pump out the same video file for you, and you should be all set. Okay. Okay, so you see a question from Taylor. Just upgraded to 10.5. Where's the Q-Link in the large mix console? So let's go ahead and take a look for it. We'll go to my large mix console here, and it's just going to be at the very top. You'll see the Q-Link. If for some reason you don't see that, I think if we come over here, if you don't see it at the top, you go to the little settings cogwheel and then look for link group. And then that should, if it's hidden there, click here and then make sure that link groups is turned on. Otherwise you may have that kind of just set to not be visible. So in the large mix console, if you don't see that, go to the settings cogwheel in the upper right hand corner, and then just make sure that link group is checked. Okay, question, is there a way to search out all of the Cubase Hangouts from March to present and get them all in one place? I could prepare a master searchable index to share with fellow users. If you want to send me an email or a message, Taylor, after the Hangout, I know you have my email address. I could send you a playlist which should have all of the Hangouts, and we would gladly accept that. If you wanted to create that would be like a wonderful resource, I think, for many people. So, but if you go to one of the Hangouts, you should see, if you go to the Cubase YouTube channel, you should probably see, if you click on playlists, you'll see the Club Cubase Google Hangout playlist, and all the ones from March that we've done this year are going to be in there. And you'll see the index is the very first, a pinned topic for each of the Hangouts. Okay, so a question, will my third-party pre-installed plugins for Pro Tools automatically work in Cubase once I install it? So generally, most of the plugins, unless it depends on the installation, but a lot of plugins will automatically install the VST2, VST3, an AU, and an AAX version by default. So if that's the case, then all of your plugins, all your third-party plugins, I'm sure they pretty much all have VST versions, because there's way more VST versions than other plugins. So you should be able to have that automatically, you should be able to just have that automatically show up. So you may not even have to reinstall it, so excuse me, if you look into your library audio plugins, you'll probably see them listed in VST and VST3 folders if you're on Mac. But yeah, so all of your plugins, as long as there's VST versions, most of them by default will automatically install, so you could switch back and forth between different applications. Okay, next question. Using the CC121, is there a way to program F1 through 4 to bring up the equalizer window and channel settings? I know the E button brings up the channel settings, but I'm still having to click over to the EQ. I don't have my CC121 connected to my work computer. It's actually connected to my studio, my personal studio. So let's say if we jump over here, I want to say, so if you wanted to bring this view by default as opposed to this view, I think pretty much, if I add a number of audio tracks, let's just say, and now if I click on this particular track here, my default view is where we see the EQ. And let me just see if there's a keyboard shortcut that would, go back and forth. Let me just see if I could find one. Sometimes so I could play around with it more, but I think one of my machines, it kind of comes up to this view first, and then I switch over to the EQs. But I'm not sure if that's a keyboard shortcut that allows you to do that. I could play around with it a little more using my CC121 after the Hangout when I get hooked up to my personal computer. So if you want to email me, I could kind of follow up and play around with it and see if there's a way to get that through like a keyboard shortcut. But I don't know one off the top of my head. Okay. All right. So see John from Southeast Wisconsin. That's good. Okay. So we have a question. What is the equivalent of using Audio Suite in Pro Tools for Cubase, applying effects to a singular stem without affecting the whole track? That's just direct offline processing. So if I wanted to come here, I could select just a region there. We'll go to your audio and go to direct offline processing, and I could just choose a plugin. So now do something horribly inappropriate. Let's put a flanger on that particular file. So now it will just play back our jazz track. And we'll just go ahead and solo this. And when it gets to here, it's going to just do our flanger. And as we get to the end, so that's really kind of all you have to do is just hit F7 or go to your audio menu, and you could go to direct offline processing. You could also just select a range here, go to audio to plugins, and you could instantiate it a different way. So if you want to say, okay, I just wanted to run this through, a phaser for that particular part, I can now. And then at any time, if you select the file, you could just kind of right click and you could remove just one particular process, even in non-sequential order, or you could just choose to delete all of the processes in that file, even after saving. So it will always store the original file and will always, unless you choose to permanently freeze it, you could always go back and undo any of those processes at any time. So, all right. So we have Sir Robert from Atlanta. That's great. Great to see you on. Okay. Question: does Cubase automatically add fades after chopping audio, or are they applied manually? So you could apply the fades manually. So if I've chopped audio, you could come here and have your edits automatically snap to the zero crossing. So that could alleviate a lot of problems. So if I wanted to take, those files, let's say that I've had, so if I wanted to take these and do a crossfade, I could just hit the letter X. But a really handy thing on each audio track is you could activate auto fades. So if you click here, you could have anytime that a clip starts to play or ends to play, that it could do an auto fade in or fade out or an auto crossfade. So you could activate that on each track by just clicking on the auto fade settings. And then that way, anytime that you make an edit, it will just do fades for you automatically. Okay, question. Can you add your own content to the Media Bay, or is it exclusive to Steinberg? You can add any content that you want with Media Bay. So as soon as I want to come here, if I don't click on the wrong thing, you could look at it in your Media Bay here, and you could define your own folders. So if you wanted to just look at this computer, let's say into documents, projects, you could have it automatically, look for particular audio files. You could tell which folders to look in, which folders not to look in. You could also just come here to your Media Bay on the right hand side. So if we click here, we click on the Media tab. And as we go to the Media tab, we could just click on the home. At this point, you could go to your file browser and you could look kind of anywhere in your particular system that you wanted to. If you have this is my favorite audio folder of my favorite plugins, you could also just right click and choose add favorite. You could give it a name. We'll just call it, say, June 23rd. And at this point, I could just go home and say, let's go to favorites. And then here's my June 23rd favorites. And I could just go through here and navigate through all my favorites or anywhere on my hard disk. So the Media Bay works for any file that's connected to your computer or network. So, okay. Okay, so I see, can we create a rack for automating several knobs? You can, come over here. There's a number of different, quick control settings. So, if you wanted to, I'm not sure if it's the rack or if you just wanted to automate several knobs. But if you go to your studio setup, you could come over here and you could have different quick controls for VST instruments or track quick controls, and you could have these mapped to your controller keyboard. So if I wanted to go to my track quick controls, let's say if I just want to control volume and panning, I could have my MIDI faders automatically control your different parameters here if it's on a synthesizer. So if I add an instrument track, I could come over here, and each instrument, depending on preset, could also have its own, various quick controls as well. So if I just come here, I could go to my quick controls for the synthesizer and have my MIDI faders automatically control these quickly. So there's a number of ways to control different parameters, and you could have 8 quick controls just very easily set up. In addition to depending on a plugin, most of the onboard plugins, you could right click and just learn a MIDI CC from there as well. Okay. All right. So we have Ireland, Sweden. Okay. All right. So we see question, can you use 2 different time signatures on 2 different tracks? Cheers. Okay. So generally the time signatures are going to be set up for, 1 time signature per, at a time. But if you needed to run, let's say if you're doing kind of a more polyrhythmic type of thing, what I've seen people do is to come over here and we'll add, let's say, a signature track. And let me just add an instrument track. So what I've seen some people do is come over here and we could add I've seen some people will start working in 1 meter. So let's say, do you want to be in 3/4, and then they will kind of sequence all of their parts in 3/4. So let's say, so I'll just, we just put in some quick step entry here. I'll do just quarter notes. And what I see a lot of people do is just take that and lock the part. So I think if we just choose to lock position, and you can do position and size, and then switch over here to, I'll do a new version, and I could have a different track version for 4/4. So now if I wanted to put in 4/4 time, so I will just kind of put in, okay, and now when we play this back, this is basically playing in 4/4. This is playing in 3/4. Of course, I had to pick the worst sounds of all time, but that's how, when we look at this, this will still be kind of in patterns of 3, and this will still be in patterns of 4/4. So you could have kind of different track versions if you need to switch back and forth for editing, but that's a way that you could have kind of a multiple time signatures on a particular track. All right. Okay, so a question from Millard. Let me go ahead and get our scenario set up here. About VCAs. Okay, so let's look at so let's say if I have my faders here. Okay, so the question is, Greg, I had a VCA fader group and wanted to automate one of the faders. As soon as I touched the volume curve, it went from -10, where it's set to 0 dB at the beginning. Did not want that. So let's go ahead and try to, let's say if I just do a quick automation here for all of the tracks. Okay, so just kind of set up quick. Okay, and let's say I have my VCA fader. Okay, so it says I wanted to automate one of the faders. As soon as I touched the volume curve, it went from -10, where it was set, to 0 dB at the beginning. So let's say if I Let's just bypass automation on all of these. Okay, so now we'll read, and I want to adjust the fader of one of these. All right, so if it's going to a VCA fader, what you may have to do and what may make sense is because like if we have tracks that are kind of going in contrary motion, so let me just set up so we show kind of what VCA faders do. So let's say if I automate all of my tracks and I want this to go up, and let me just put it in cycle mode here. So let's say this track I want to go up, and this one is going down. So I'll just kind of set up some fake automation here. So we have channels are going in kind of opposite contrary motion here. So now when I adjust my VCA, it's going to take control of all of those faders and kind of bring them all down. But still, if my VCA is going up and the track is going down, it's going to kind of attenuate that. So what you may need to do, Millard, is to come over here so we can see that we have our automation kind of spread across multiple tracks here. But on the VCA fader itself, you see this little arrow. And here you may want to choose to, if I automate my VCA, you may want to choose to combine the automation of the VCA and the linked faders, and then that will attenuate. So if I look at the automation there before, and now with the VCA fader, it will now take into account the information that's been done with the VCA fader. So you may have to just kind of click here and automate. And if you have something that's in a VCA, you may just sometimes holding down, if you wanted to just hold down the Alt or Option key, you could override the current linking of that. So that's another thing that you may want to try. So try adjusting the fader, holding down the Alt or Option key. And then if that doesn't do what you want, try to just on the VCA fader itself, do the combine the automation of the VCA and the linked faders together. And I think that will get you where you want. Okay, so just going through introductions. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Greetings from Colombia, South America. How can I have a stereo mix and a 5.1 mix and export them separately in the same session? Okay, so let's get this set up here. Let me just do a new project. Okay, so let's just add a couple audio tracks here. Okay, so I'm going to go to my audio connections window. And let's say for my outputs, I'll just remove this bus for now. And I want this to be 5.1 bus. And if I wanted to, we could also, within this, just add a child bus for our stereo. Okay. So at this point, I could just say all of these tracks are going to be, when we come here, I'm just going to hold down my Alt and Shift, and we're going to send all of the tracks to my 5.1 out. So now when we come directly here, we could take, this stereo track and pan it, anywhere within our 5.1 mix. So as we've done that, so a lot of people will set that up. And if we go to your control room, so also in your audio connections, it makes sense to have a control room set up for 5.1. So I will go to my control room setup. And here comes my son. Having a little too much fun. All right. So I will just come over here and I will just remove some of my monitors here at this point. And I'll start off with a 5.1 monitor. So I'll right click and let's add our monitor. And we have 4 separate monitors. So I want this to be in 5.1. So now I could choose to monitor different components in 5.1. We go to our control room here. When we go to our down mix presets, we could have this automatically go from 5.1 and we could monitor in stereo if we want to do this. Now, a lot of people can take different approaches to this. Some people will add another stereo output here. So when you go to the audio connections, they may also come here and have a stereo output. You could also, I believe, send it to a child bus. So if I wanted to now come over here, let's just see if this is the child bus is in the audio mix down. Okay. So what a lot of people do, and they're kind of working on both, is they may set up this little function in the big mix console for direct routing summing mode. And they will add you have a 5.1 out, and let's add a stereo output. So at this point, we'll go to the audio connections. Let's add a stereo out. And these could be going to different interfaces. And when we go to our larger console here, so now everything is being sent to, our 5.1 outputs for our audio tracks here. I'll just hide the input channels. Okay, and then if we go to your racks, we have something called direct routing. So at this point, we could go to our direct routing, and I could choose to also send these tracks to my stereo out. And then I'll activate. So at this point, let's say I'll select all these and I'll activate using quick link. So now both these tracks are going to the 5.1 out and the stereo out. So some people will just choose to do mixing and different plugins that you could have. If you wanted to kind of cheat a little bit, if you go to your surround, there's a mix 6-2. So you could run this on every track and activate it when you're working in stereo, and this will do your down mix for you. And at this point, so you could have that on every single channel, but now each track will go to a 5.1 and a stereo out. And when you want to export, you just go to your export audio mix down. You could do, okay, I wanted to export the 5.1 and the stereo and make stems all at once. So you could work in kind of multiple formats in stereo and surround. There's a lot of people that just work in stereo, get everything set up, and then build the surround mix from there. And we'll just kind of make everything great in stereo. And then at that point, send it to the 5.1 outputs. So there's different schools of thought, and sometimes I know people have done large projects of taking like an existing great record and mixing it in 5.1 surround sound. And they'll rebuild the stereo mix first and then build. And then once they're happy with that, then add the 5.1 mix and treat it as separate. But if you need to do it at once, you could just set up just 2 outputs and set up your mixer to go to a 5.1 and a stereo out. And you could work on it simultaneously if you wanted to. All right, good to see Jan from Sweden. Okay. Okay, so question, what's the best way to slow and pitch down a song in order to sing a few steps lower? So, a lot of times you may not want it to necessarily slow down, but if you wanted to come here, let's just find a particular project here that we could show. Okay, so let's say if I take this. So, and let's say if we have this kind of set up, and let me rebuild my connections again here real quick. Get it working back in stereo. Okay, and I'll define my connections here so we could hear. All right, so now that let's just place this one track in musical mode. So now that we're here, if I wanted to lower the pitch to sing in different keys, and a lot of times you may have to lower the pitch on particular instruments. So there's a thing called a transpose track. So what this is able to do is I'll just add a track here, and this will be just our transpose track. And I'm going to move this to the top. So as we're going along here, so let's say right at this point, I want to go down a whole step. I just type in -2. And let's say here I want it to be -1. And then we go back to our original key. So you could do that. Now, if you didn't want particular tracks, like maybe you don't want your drum tracks to transpose, you could select your drum tracks here. So let's just say, I'll take these tracks, and then you could choose in the info line where basically you could choose to have it be independent so that those won't follow different the different changes. So that's a setting that you can do from the info lines. Just let me just, so we see this follow global transpose. So I could just choose those to be independent. So as if we don't want the drums to change pitch, but the guitar and bass too, you could have that set up as well. So there's lots of people that will sing here and then just kind of raise the pitch up of their vocal. So okay, so just seeing kind of more continuations on Millard's question about VCA faders. I think we covered that, but if not, just let me know, Millard. Okay. Okay, so question. Hi, Greg. In Cubase 10, can the mix console also be colored to match the corresponding project tracks? That is a function that came in 10.5 by popular request. So, and how you could activate it once you're in 10.5, so it's not in 10, is if you go to Preferences and go to Tracks and Mix Console, you could just activate color mix console channels. So I could just hit apply and then it's not there. But now if I activate that particular preference, we can see all the mix console channels. When I click apply, will kind of match the colors. So it's not in version 10, but if you upgrade to 10.5, you could have that feature. Okay. Okay, so we see question. Hi, Greg. Assuming I play the same simple chord for 16 bars, but then I added different chords to each measure of the chord track, will the notes of my simple chord adjust to the nearest notes? So it will adjust to the nearest notes. So let's say I'll just do a quick new project. I'll revert this while we're here. But it could depend upon the settings that you have for the particular project. So if I come here, and I'll start with a chord track. Okay, so let's say if I have a D chord, and now I will make a quick instrument track. All right, sorry if you hear my son in the background. He's having a little too much fun. Okay, so I copy that over here. And let's say if I have this repeated a number of times, and then I enter in new chords. So let's say I added E minor here. Okay, so when we look at these, I will just kind of open this up a little bit so you can see it in the in-place editor. So now we see that this is going to be the D major chord. Let me see if we could just so I see that this is our D major chord. But once okay, so then I add different chords to each measure of the chord track. Will the notes of my simple chord adjust to the nearest notes? All right. So if you wanted to adjust, what you need to do is to go to chords here and tell it to follow the chords. And as we do this, we could just choose to follow directly. And now we'll see these notes match the chords right here. So you can see that you'll have those notes adjust. So you have to, within a chord setting of the inspector, come right over here and tell it to follow chords or chords and scales. And then it will automatically follow and move to the nearest notes to be within a chord. Okay, so question, is there a way to program more than 8 quick controls? CC 121, I'd like to have all 12 knobs control something. There's only, when we're dealing with quick controls, there's only 8 quick controls. So there isn't a way to access more quick controls, but what you could do is the bottom 4 encoders of the EQ section. You could control the first 4 auxiliary sends, so the send levels, and I think you'll see kind of the light on the EQ type enable. But if you click on all bypass on the CC 121, that will control sends 5 through 8. So those functions are still there. So, but you have 8 quick controls, and that's kind of how the program was written, for 8 quick controls and not for 12 or 16. Just because most MIDI fader boxes and controllers will have 8 or 9 controllers, and usually they have 9 for when working with like Hammond organ drawbars, stuff like that. So there's only 8 quick controls, and since there's only 8 that are defined within quick controls, that's what the CC 121 will allow you to do. But those 4 knobs can do the aux sends 1 through 4 and 5 through 8 once you put it into the quick control mode. Okay. Just going through some of the different introductions. Okay, so people are everywhere. All right. Okay, so a question. I updated my timeline. Just jumped way ahead. Excuse me. Okay, just going through. Okay, so I think we're just getting back. All right. Okay. Sorry, my timeline, the chat session sometimes jumps way ahead. Okay. So question, I updated to 10.5 Pro yesterday, and I noticed that Cubase 10 Pro is still working. Do both versions work? How kind of Steinberg does their licenses, which I think is a great thing, is if you have Cubase 10.5, that will work for Cubase 10, Cubase 9.5, 9, 8.5. So previous versions will still work with later licenses. So once you have Cubase 10.5, that license can run for Cubase SX1 or any other version. So I recently had a friend and she just updated from Cubase 5 to Cubase 10.5, and she has it on two different computers because the operating systems are really different, and she's using the same e-licenser key to run her 10.5 and her Cubase 5 as well. So yeah, it's perfectly fine, and we realize that at some point operating systems will drop components that you may still have to go back to earlier versions for plugin compatibility. So it's designed to a later license of Cubase will run previous versions, and you could still run Cubase 10, no problem. So, okay. Okay, so just see a question. So what are we working on today? So generally, the Hangouts, as we mentioned earlier, are just going to be questions that people submit. So any question you have, there's not really a special topic per se. It's just really answering your questions that you run into. Okay, so greetings from India. Can I drag an audio region with the fade remaining in its position? I believe that the fade's going to be tied to the event, to its position within the event, as opposed to the fade position on time. So if I come here, and let's say I had this kind of cropped here, and I do the fade. As I move that, the fade is a component of what's going on in the part. So that's why when you move the part, that the fade stays. What we could do is actually, okay, so I guess my OBS is, so I see from Ed Rugman, hi Greg, any idea how Steinberg support is doing in Europe? I had a support ticket a month back, and with the lockdown, I know staff are heading home. I think most of the support staff has been working, but I think they're working from home. I haven't talked to anyone in the last couple of weeks. It's been a couple of weeks since I talked to someone from the Hamburg office on the phone, but it seems like I know everyone is still working. So I'm not sure what the status is of your support ticket, but you could try to resubmit it, or if you want to pass it on to me, I could send it to support. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could see if I could send it on to, see what's going on with it. But, I know they've been responding as normal to a lot of people. So, okay. Okay, so a question from Nick. Hi, Greg. I'm about to order a Pro Audio PC. I've been a Mac user my whole life. Question, is there any way to migrate my key commands, macros, etc. from the Mac to the PC? If you go to your edit and just go to Profile Manager and save a profile. And this will save like all of your user settings for plugins, all of your key commands, macros, preferences, everything will be kind of carried directly over. So just go to save as a profile under Profile Manager. And then when you get your PC, just import your profile and you should be kind of all set directly with that. So just save it as a profile, and then all your settings from your Mac will open directly in your PC. Okay, so hi Greg, could you explain a little bit about the main differences between peak and LUFS normalization? So, when we deal with normalizing an audio file, and depending upon the file, so let's see if let me just see if I could find maybe a drum loop might work well. So just go to my media. Okay, so let's say if I have this particular file here, and I will just choose to, we'll take the same file and I'm going to, so this is our original file, and let's say this file, I'm going to do bounce selection on it, and we'll replace the event. And I'll do the same for here. So now we'll have independent audio events. All right, so I will. Let's make this a little larger. Okay, so when we listen to it and we want to do normalizing, just make sure. Okay, so yeah, under normalizing, so we'll go to our audio events and normalize our audio. So we'll go to our processes, choose normalize. So let's say I wanted to do this to minus, let's say if I was doing it maybe for more of a spot of like a streaming. So say I'll do that to minus 14 LUFS, and let's say if I do this file to minus 14 dB, so generally, so this first file here has been normalized to minus 14 LUFS, and this file has been finalized, let's say, to minus 14 dB. So what a loudness unit is, when you're dealing with peaks often, we saw this kind of age-old dilemma, and we used to see it on TV. It's probably the same in other countries, but in America, like the TV commercials would kind of jump out in volume. So they actually started, through the FCC in the United States, something called a Calm Act, so that there was a known loudness level. So people can manipulate the peak levels on meters so that their content could jump out and be louder. So with the loudness unit, that kind of is almost taking not the peaks, but you could think of it more along the lines of the RMS, or what the average volume is. So as we're delivering to different media, such as if you want to get on broadcast, or you want to be optimized volume levels for like streaming services for iTunes or Spotify. I think Spotify is at minus 14 loudness units is what they're expecting. I think Netflix has their own standards of what they want to ingest for their broadcasting and streaming. That's why we see the ability of doing loudness normalizing. So you could have kind of different settings. So just to show you what minus 14 LUFS versus minus 14 dB is like, you could see that visually, but it's really about who you're delivering the content to. And I know a lot of composers, if they deliver kind of at the right level, that they get a lot more work just because they're actually delivering at a level where someone doesn't have to go through and do all sorts of work after the fact for them. So that's kind of the difference between it. So think of like your LUFS or loudness units. Some people call it R128 metering as being kind of more the average level, and as opposed to peaks, which could just, not indicate the source material, but maybe transients can be emphasized with that. So probably more people will be working and delivering. I think loudness units will be more essential as time goes on. Any tips for mastering in Cubase without shelling out for Wavelab? There's different, definitions of what mastering is. If you wanted to come over here and just, run a number of different processes on your on your mix down, at that point, just run it through, perhaps like an EQ. So, probably one of the best sounding EQs on the market currently is the frequency EQ. And this could be incredibly surgical. A lot of people will do like a multi-band compressor. So if you want to have a multi-band compressor, that's pretty common in the mastering chain. If you wanted to, also, some people will like to add like some tape saturation. So if you want to go to magneto, and then maybe as a post fader, you could come over here and under dynamics, maybe have like a brick wall limiter. So those are some of the processes that can give you kind of a mastered sound, but I think mastering is a lot more involved than just kind of processing. And that's those more involved aspects of metadata, delivering to multiple formats, and treating your multiple files as a collective entity. That Wavelab does that exceptionally well. But if you just wanted to process your files so that they're louder and sound mastered to what a lot of people considered kind of it being beefed up, you could try like a signal chain like that. Okay. Hey there. Question for y'all. Is there any easy way besides having to menu dive to turn off and on MIDI sync on individual instruments? I just wondered if I'm missing an easy switch toggle. So not really. You just have to go to your transport. And at this point, hang on, my son is knocking. I may have to get a movie going for him. Just bear with me. All right, I apologize for that. So back. Question. All right, so going back about having to come over here and just do setting up your timing. So project synchronization is just coming over here and turning on and off different destinations for your instrument. So there's not just a global toggle per track of sending sync out. So you would just do it directly here in the project synchronization setup. You could turn them all off if you just put on internal time code, or if you're doing or just adjust your destinations here. So okay, so question: can Cubase detect cuts in video? Doesn't Cubase doesn't do that? That's a kind of a Nuendo specific thing at this point. So okay, question is: hi Greg, I've been trying to use Zoom to do tutorials for Cubase. Is there any combination of products or devices I can use successfully? Port mic and Cubase output to Zoom. I'm on Windows 10. How I have my setup, which I found to be pretty reliable, is I take my audio interface out of Cubase, which is going to a UR24C. I connect that into a Yamaha mixer. I think it's an MW12CX, kind of an older mixer I've had for a number of years. And I connect my microphone in that. And what I do is basically I use one audio interface for Cubase, and then I use my mixer, which has a USB output. I use that as the audio interface that transmits to OBS, but it would be the same with Zoom. So at that point, all you have to do is have Zoom talking to one interface and then Cubase talking to another interface. If you don't have two audio interfaces, what a lot of people do is just, feed it into the onboard audio interface. So take an output of, if depending on your audio interface, if you have like a loop back function, you could often just, like our Steinberg UR series interfaces have a loopback function, and that will take an incoming microphone and transmit the audio, and then you could take that audio output directly into the onboard audio interface and use that for Zoom. And so I find it kind of having two different streams is also really helpful for a lot of different functions, and that's how I kind of set up the audio for my transmission. And if you want to email me with your email address, I could send you just like a tutorial of how, just a video I did for some of our internal team of how to get this going, like how to do a hangout using OBS and routing the audio and stuff that I passed on to other people. Okay, so question: how can you add a bar in Time Warp? So let's come over here. Okay. So with our Time Warp tool, if we wanted to come here, it's really just whatever part that you want to be moved to a particular point in time. So you could just kind of make it, so if you want to add more bars and change the tempo accordingly, you could just move those measures specifically wherever you want. So just kind of do one bar at a time and place each bar. So, but if I'm misunderstanding, just kind of let me know. Okay. Hi Greg, I'm having trouble with my sound pack. I purchased Pop Essentials. It's missing in my Groove Agent. So let's take a look. Let's see if I have Pop Essentials library loaded here on my demo computer. So the one thing that you could try to do, if you don't see it, there's going to be a utility. So I'll just show you here, called the Steinberg Library Manager. So we'll see this application here called Steinberg Library Manager. And make sure when you go to Groove Agent that you should see it kind of listed here. I don't have the pop one. But make sure that you see it listed here. So when you go to, if you install it, see if it's going to be listed here, and then you should be able to. And also, if you see the files themselves, like you may see like a .vst sound, try right clicking on it and then opening it with the Steinberg Library Manager. And that will make the association between that particular library where that file is, and so that Cubase and Groove Agent can access and know where to look for those particular sounds. So try right-clicking on the VST sound and making that link with the Steinberg Library Manager. So question, hi, considering jumping to Nuendo, do you know or able to say if the two programs will unite in features, version 11 onward? My team all use Cubase. I don't want to be unable to work across future updates. So I don't know, what currently the development plans are at parity, and generally, Nuendo has a lot more features. So you may notice that as there's more features, it takes longer to implement those features. So that's why you often see kind of a time difference between the two programs. So I'm not sure if they're planning on being in sync, or I haven't heard of any plans for them to always be in sync. But a lot of the functionality, like projects, can still often be opened up without, but maybe like a brand new feature may not be, accessible. But generally, for the most part, the program files, the Cubase and Nuendo project files can be interchangeable still. Okay, so we have a question, saving preset versus using track presets. What's the difference between them? So you could have like a preset that's going to be just for, if you save a preset, like let's say for a plugin. So if you've come here and you've modified the settings and you're like, okay, I want this, you could save that as a preset. So there's like plugin presets, there will be channel strip presets that can be stored and loaded independently. You could also have EQ presets. Now if I wanted to incorporate all of these together, so let's say my volume, panning, customized, presets and settings on plugins and EQs and channel strip, that's when you could right click and save it as a track preset so that you could open up those settings. So, if it's like, this is how I record my drums, this is how I record, different program functions. I could just simply call up that base set of settings and use it in other projects. Okay, just read through different questions here. All right. I have a question in the past, holding a key, anchor the sample in the end of it instead of beginning, or is it still possible? So, so let me just... Okay, so it's the question in the past, holding a key, anchor the sample in the end of it instead of the beginning. Is it still possible? So I think, if we have, let me just undo a bunch of changes here quickly. Okay, so I'm just not sure if I understand. So in the past, holding a key, anchor the sample in the end of it instead. So there's, within the sample editor, you have, so if I come here, let's say we go to our definition, you have this thing called a snap point. And this snap point can be moved anywhere. And this can now be what the sample is locked to. So instead of to the beginning of the file, as we want to snap, it's going to be where this actual snap point is that locks to the file. So maybe it's just a snap point that you're doing. I think there's a keyboard shortcut to move this snap point directly to a particular file as well. So let me just see if it's maybe under... but there is a keyboard shortcut to do that as well. So you can say snap point to cursor. So if I'm here and I wanted the snap point in the selected file to be placed here, I could just go to snap point to cursor. And now that snap point is automatically aligned. And now this is what is snapping to the grid. So I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but I think that might be doing kind of what you're describing. So, but let me know if I misunderstood. Okay. Okay, so we had this kind of sent in advanced. It says, "Hi Greg, is it possible to create and save microtonal custom scales in Cubase Pro 10.5 so that we can use scale correction, transpose, etc.? Thanks." This could really come down, there's a MIDI plugin, so called a micro tuner. So let's take a look at it here. A lot of times, different instruments may not respond to the micro tuner, and it's just how MIDI was originally set up. Hopefully with like MIDI 2.0, we may see this change. So, someone had sent in a question, so this may be the same question that was sent in, but so when we want to do, and with VST version 3.5 plugins, and I think this came in maybe version 6.5, we added the capability with note expression to have independent pitch bend per note. So if I wanted to come here, let's say I have a sound, we could open up a micro tuner plugin. This is just using just a shareware, freeware plugin from TAL, T-A-L. They downloaded. So now when we go to our MIDI inserts, and I play a C chord, I play a C note, and move the pitch here, it's not going to change because a lot of times the different instruments don't support some instruments will support micro tuning natively, and most of them by default don't. So if you wanted to do more micro tuning, if you're working with different temperaments, I could come here and let's open up, let's say something, we'll start off with just like to a clean slate. So now I play a C major chord, and this is in retro log. I could go to the micro tuner plugin, and I could come over here, and there's different presets. So if you wanted to be pure major, pure minor, Pythagorean, but I could come here, and as I hit the C note, I could adjust the temperament. So when I go to D, I can make the D sharper. And let's make the E. So as I just hit the note here, we could hear the changes. So now if I played like a C major chord, it could be out of tune. But I could also come here and say I want it to be pure major. And we could set our root key to C. Now as I play with the VST 3.5 instrument, that could be perfectly in tune. So this will kind of take away, different, you could have kind of pure tuning temperaments. Now, many instruments may have their own tuning and temperament scale inside. And, I know even going back almost 30 years ago, like my Proteus, modules from EMU, you could have different temperaments. And that was a unique feature of the instruments at the time. But most software instruments and most MIDI instruments don't necessarily handle different temperaments. But VST 3.5 instruments, where we can have independent pitch bending per note, will allow you to do that. So you can create your own scales here. If you want to create your own custom microtonality, it won't carry over into the grid for Vari Audio and kind of different functions for that. But you could create your custom tuning scales here, but know that you're going to have to use an instrument that supports it. So if it's like a contact library that's VST2 still, at that point it's not going to support it, but it may have some internal capabilities to do that, but just natively it won't do that. So using kind of like your, micro tuner plugin, if you needed to do more Middle Eastern scales, you could do that quite easily, and I know I've worked with artists, many times who, I could think of, one of the guys in Steely Dan I've worked with before, where it's all of a sudden, they don't like MIDI because it's all in equal temperament, and equal temperament sounds very out of tune to him. So, there's kind of different functions for that as well, whereas, some people equal temperament really bothers them. So you can do it, but you probably would need to have a instrument that's probably VST 3.5. Other companies can develop it. A lot of companies haven't chosen to. It's hard work. It's a lot of development. And, probably the vast majority of users aren't going to be doing microtonality, but if it's something you're interested in, check out, the Steinberg range of instruments like Hallian Sonic, Pad Shop, Retrolog, which will allow you to have and take advantage of those functions. Okay, so question, are the 16-bit drum samples in Groove Agent SE5 still 16-bit in Groove Agent? Yeah, just because it's playing back through a different instrument, if it's a 16-bit sample, it's a 16-bit sample. But once it's played back, and if you alter the sound, like even increasing the volume, like, 1/1000th of a dB, at that point, it's working in 32-bit resolution, but you could have higher resolution drum sounds. But the same drum sample itself, it's not going to magically be higher just because it's loaded into the full Groove Agent 5 versus Groove Agent SE5. So it's still going to be playing back the same sample. Okay, so it's a nice comment from Patrick Arend, I believe. Sorry if I mispronounced her name, or Arend. Hello, Mr. Ondo. Thank you for all the great work you do. Your tutorials have been a godsend. I'm glad that's been helpful for you. Seeing a comment for converting videos. Handbrake is a great converting video utility. So that's one to look at if you need to convert different video files and make it work with Cubase. Okay. So question, hi Greg, why mix button on compressor affects the signal if mix button is either all the way to the left or to the right? So let's give it a shot here. We'll open up a project and check it out. So I'll just put on like maybe full mix here. Let me just activate the project. And let's destroy a mix by putting a huge compressor on it. Okay, so just, let's say I'll squash it here. That was okay. So when you come here, that's going to be completely dry. And if we wanted to kind of blend in the signal, the original signal with it, we could adjust the mix. So now we're hearing kind of the original, and as we do this, we could. So I can see where you might think that it's going to be dry, but when it's dry, it's not. Think of it, the dry is not blending in the original signal, not dry as in there's no compression on it. So between the wet of the mix to the dry means that there's no original signal being kind of processed inside. So I can see why it could be a little why it could be misunderstood, but I think it's technically right. So, okay. So I see Ted Springman is also, I know Ted has done some Hangout indexes by topic. So maybe if you want to work, so maybe Taylor and Ted could work together on that. So, okay. So I see a question. Studio One more popular than Cubase? No, I don't think so. I think, Cubase is the most widely used DAW in the world, and it's been around for 30 years. So I think Cubase is probably the most popular worldwide. So. Okay. What is Backbone? Backbone is a new instrument. It's kind of a lot of people, if you're to ask a lot of people, it'd be considered kind of like a drum resynthesizer. But what Backbone can allow you to do is to, kind of come over here and take different, you can think of it as like a sound design. And I'm not an expert in it yet, but a lot of people use it for coming up with, different kick drums. So let's say if I wanted to, let's see if I have. I would just add an instrument track here with it. So a lot of people use it to kind of deconstruct, different kick drums where we could do synthesis and break apart different components, but it could be much more also like a different sound design tool. So if I wanted to come here, break apart the envelope, and you could have up to 8 different sources layered together. But, check out, there's a lot of great tutorials, and, you could check out some of the, especially like Robert Dudzik, who's like an amazing sound designer, coming up for different. So it's kind of a sound design resynthesis tool is kind of what Backbone is about. Okay. Okay, so it says, thank you, Greg, for answering my questions. If my ears have your memory right, you may be the same Greg that did a Cubase live seminar in Guitar Center in Texas. You convinced me to update Cubase. Thanks. I've done a lot of travel in Texas over the years, so I used to always start in, I do a week in Texas, do, Dallas to Austin to San Antonio to Houston. That was a typical week's run in Texas. But yeah, I've done a lot of work in Texas over the years. I've been probably traveling to Texas 20 some years. Haven't been there in a little while since the pandemic. But yeah, there's a good chance I was doing the seminar for you. So glad to see you on the Hangout. Okay, so I see from Taylor, Q-Link not at top and link group not in setup menu. Any other thoughts? I see it in the lower zone. Could live with that if I must. You could always use Alt-Shift or Option+Shift and hold those down, and it'll get kind of the same functions. So let's just take a look again just to make sure if you don't see the link groups in the larger mixer. So as soon as I deactivate here, so if you make sure, Taylor, that you're on not here, but on a very far right kind of settings cogwheel, and with the link groups, see if you see the link groups listed there. But you could always probably just click on show all. But as soon as I turn off the link groups, but make sure you're kind of looking at that specific moment in time. If not, just let me know. And maybe I could do a quick remote access for you on your machine in the next day or two. Okay, so seeing a great link between Ted and Taylor, where we have kind of searchable links for all the topics covered in the Hangouts. It's great. Thank you, Ted, for doing that. I really appreciate it. So I see a question. My samples are playing at double speed in the media bay, and that's the same for every sample pack I try, including samples provided by Steinberg. Any ideas on how to fix this, please? It sounds like maybe a sample rate mismatch. So let me just see. I'll do a new project here. And I will switch my sample rate from 44.1, let's say, to 96K. And I will come over here to my different loops and samples. And
the better part.
So let's see if I come over here and switch the sample rate, if that makes a difference in the pitch. Seems like the same pitch regardless. So I'm not sure what would cause, check to see if your audio interface is at the same sample rate. I could do some more research, but to me it sounds kind of like a classic sample rate mismatch. But I think, most of the samples will automatically kind of repitch as we audition at the same one. But check your audio interface and try switching the sample rate on your audio interface. And it may have to be done especially if you're doing external clocking. You may have to, you may have to tell your audio interface if it's being externally clocked and not to be. So. All right. All right. So see people from New Jersey. It's starting to get hot for a lot of people. Seeing comments on the weather. Okay, question. Is it recommended to have the red input faders among the others on Mixer? Do they work as gain level faders? So when you start off, you could have your input faders here. And these can come in handy, and I've used them a lot for different live recording scenarios. I've gotten kind of involved with some large live format recordings. Like I did a project with Alan Parsons. I did like a big Eric Clapton's Crossroads Festival. And one of the things I found really helpful is, once I'm done tracking, I may hide these. But like I remember, recording 48 tracks at 24-bit 96K for 17 hours for like the Eric Clapton's Crossroads project in 2004, I think. And inevitably, and my position was I was just sitting, there was one truck that was doing, and basically we alternated acts. So every other act, the truck did it. And then I was sitting next to the front of house and just running a split from the front of house. I was doing tracking there and had to broadcast to Sirius satellite radio at the time. And inevitably, as the day went on, the bands got louder and louder and louder. So with the input channels, what I was able to do is I just linked all of my input channels. And as the group would get louder and louder, I would then be able to just kind of bring down the faders like between songs ever so slightly. In this way, we can make sure that you weren't clipping. So that's one case where I've used, when you don't have control of like the level of a mic pre, or someone's just totally, someone puts a mic up and the guitar amps at, 1500 dB or whatever, you may want to just bring it down so that you're not clipping on input. But after the initial recording stage, I probably wouldn't, there's not much use for the input faders. So at that point, I would choose to hide them. But they could be a really helpful function, especially for live recording when maybe you don't have hands-on control of the gain that's going into the recording system. And I also used it I remember I did with Frank Philbetti, we did a live recording of Zappa Plays Zappa at Madison Square Garden. And that was like, 4-hour show. And, so that, being able to adjust the input levels as you're printing, was really, really helpful. Okay. So let's just move on. Thanks for all the great questions. If you've learned a new tip or trick, please feel free to give a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can always be notified of future Hangouts. And if you want to send questions in advance, please feel free to send them to Club Cubase at steinberg.de. Okay. Okay. Okay, so hope everyone's doing well. Some really useful gems here. Thanks from London. Great, and glad it's been helpful for you. Okay. Okay, so question. Hi, Greg. I hope you are well. What could cause newly inserted VST not to be able to activate? They will stay dimmed out, not even open. So if you have the constrained delay compensation button enabled here on the left, so let's say I am tracking. The intention of this is to minimize plugins that have high latency that could kind of affect real-time performance if you're playing a software instrument or if you're tracking and you're going to hear maybe delay. So let's say if I add an audio track, And now I go to instantiate an insert plugin. So let's say if I put on something that's really latent, like let's say maybe a big multiband compressor, I'll turn that on, and we'll see that when I activate it now that it's not active, it's not turned on, and then I can't turn it on because we told Cubase to kind of run and bypass plugins that have high latency when the constrained delay compensation is turned on. So now I turn that off, the plugin will become enabled. So probably if you're adding a plugin and then it's not turning on or not activating, just make sure that you deactivate the constrained delay compensation. I think that would help and solve your problem for you. Okay. Okay, so we see a question. When you stated that 5.1 outputs could be going to different interfaces than stereo, but how do you do that? I want to use multiple interfaces, but when I ask how, I cannot get definitive. Generally, you want to use one interface. So if you're using, if you're doing a 5.1, you'd probably want an interface that has, 6 outputs or 8 outputs. So, the reason why you don't see a lot of programs working with multiple audio interfaces is because each interface has, a predetermined clock. So even if you have like a UR22, which, was selling for $149 or, maybe a little more for the UR22C, that can have, a sample rate of 192K. So that means that there's 192,000 divisions per second. Now, the DAW wants to have a common way to send out the audio from Cubase so that it's going to play back reliably. Now, when you have different audio interfaces that are all connected to your computer, there's a good chance that interface A and C is not going to be in time with B and D. So that's why we kind of shy away and why you don't see many programs using multiple interfaces. The Mac, you could do it through what's called there's a couple workarounds. On the Mac, you could do in the audio MIDI setup an aggregate device, but that compounds the latency, and sometimes the clocking between the two can sometimes be a little bit off. On Windows, I've seen people, use ASIO for All, which is kind of an ASIO driver for like the standard Windows audio drivers, and then be able to route. But again, it doesn't work so well for using multiple interfaces. So if you wanted to have multiple inputs and outputs, try to get one interface that has the inputs and outputs that you need, or has the ability to expand the inputs and outputs through something like an ADAT connection or an AES or some other form of expansion. So if you want to do 5.1, think of having an audio interface with 6 outs or 8 outputs, 8 analog outputs that you're connected to different speakers. That's the most common way. Okay, and so if you have an Army, just a further discussion, if you have an Army 666 channels and a GSR 24M 32 channels, so if you have 66 channels and 32 channels, those are going to work separately. Think of maybe getting a way to, perhaps to expand. Army is pretty good at having, if you use like their PCI interfaces, you could expand and have multiple interfaces, working under one driver, but generally having, 66 channels on an RME and a GSR 24M with 32 channels, those are going to work as like separate entities. So, okay. Okay, just reading through different comments. Okay, so it says, hi, Greg from South Korea. Can you show us how to sidechain trick using an EQ and a peak controller to sidechain on? Okay, so we'll show you some basic sidechaining stuff that we could do. So let's... And we had a question about, that was also mailed in. We'll try to get to this question while we're doing this topic. So one of the questions that was mailed in was how to sidechain using their UAD plugins, and sidechaining requires a VST3 plugin. I still think that the UAD is still kind of at VST2, so it's a bit old at this point. So natively, they won't have sidechaining capability. And they had also asked about kind of doing it with, I think, Fab EQ3. So and this would work in the same way. So if we have a kick here, so we'll show you how to do basic sidechain, and we'll kind of get into so using EQ and peak controller. So we'll show you how to do a typical sidechain here. I'll make sure I don't kill everyone volume wise. So let's say I'll adjust this. So if I wanted the synth sound, this sound to be sidechained by this kick, what I could do is we can go to a compressor on this particular channel, and then we'll see just to the right here, we'll see this little sidechain input. So, and now I could drop down and select my destination. So I'm going to just say, let's send this kick as the sidechain input. And we could actually have multiple channels feeding that sidechain. So if I wanted a kick and a snare. And so now as we play this compressor on the selected channel of the bass is going to be triggered. So that compressor is going to be triggered by this kick track. So we come here and listen to it. So that's a way to set up kind of typical sidechaining. So let's say, now some EQs can also be sidechained. So let's take a look and see if any of the built-in ones can do it. So we'll try with the Studio EQ. I'm not sure if that allows for sidechaining. It doesn't look like it. But let's see, maybe if frequency doesn't look like it allows it. So some EQ plugins can allow you to do sidechaining too, but generally, it's easiest if the plugin will support it and has a sidechain input. So mostly compressors will do that. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. I'll blow this up a little bit here. So question, hi Greg, I got a problem. My audio tracks seem visually to be clipping, but there is no clipping. The audio wave is misleading. When I double click on a track, it shows it's not clipping. So there is a separate amplitude for a zoom for the amplitude. So if you come here, you may notice that you see this little slider so we go to the right corner and then down, and here we could have this kind of automatically zoom, and I think it's maybe Option G or H or Alt G and H. So hold down Alt or Option and then G or H, and this could zoom the amplitude. So if you have something that's maybe like a very low level guitar part. So let's say if I bring this down, so let's say if we look at this and you're like, oh, I can't really edit. Here's when you may want to increase the zoom on kind of low level amplitude. So you could do it by holding down Alt or Option G and H to zoom in just the waveform. So it's not affecting the volume, but just a visual representation of the zoom of the waveform. And you could also do it. So if we take our cursor just to this little row here, you could adjust the zooming of the visual aspect of the waveform directly from there as well. So I think Alt or Option G, that will kind of get it back to where you're thinking. And then you could also zoom in and out, Alt or Option plus G and H. Okay, so I think Taylor found his linked group, so thanks for letting us know. Okay, sorry, my timeline jumped way ahead. Just sneak back. Okay. Okay, so I'm back. Thanks for all the great questions again. Okay, we're doing well on time. Okay, just reading through. Okay, so just saw, hi, and thanks for doing these. It would be great to get a full walk through the media bay. We'll try to do a quick overview of it. So what the media bay is going to allow you to do is to kind of find and access different files that are relevant for Cubase. Because when we start working in projects in Cubase, you may not need to see Excel spreadsheets or Word documents or picture files. So when you go to Media Bay, we can think of this as kind of being a database not only for audio files, but project files, MIDI files, channel strip presets, MIDI loops, effects chain presets. So everything that's kind of relevant, and it'll be broken down into kind of, 3 different areas. So we could, select, different files. Let's say I'll just kill that. So we have kind of our file browser on the left. We could have, you kind of an attribute inspector on the right and the main media bay in the center. So if we want to look for particular files at this point, I could say I'm looking for different drum loops. And, you could just kind of, come right over here and say kick. And this will find, a zillion different kick drums throughout your whole. So this is like every kick drum in your VST sound. Now you could choose to only go to particular folders. So you can say, I just want to go to kicks that are in this particular file, or I just wanted to look at, what files are here. So you say I want like an ambient guitar. I could just type in guitar. And now this will allow us to audition your different files that are guitar. Or if you say, okay, I want bass. Now everything that is tagged as bass. And that could be audio files, but it could also be plug-in presets, whatever you wanted to do. So when you come over here, you could also have an attribute inspector. So you can say, I want bass, that's synth bass, and then that are in this particular library. And then I could find presets based on those particular conditions. You could have, different ratings. So we can see here, like a lot of times people may go, I'm going through different presets and I like this one. I hate that one. You could actually give it like 5 stars or 3 stars. So as you do this, you can kind of, surgically filter out, what you're looking for. And as you start working with your own data, you could come over here and here you could see kind of all the different tagging information. And if you wanted to, you could actually add your own criteria. So, say I used it on, there's a number of different, properties. I want to find a synth bass sound used on this artist, on this album, on this song. And you could have everything kind of tagged to that level. And you could add your own tagging criteria. And as we come over here, you could also see the media bay just on the right-hand side. So I could now just access, different files. And if I was looking for, even if I wanted to have just a portion of a file, so say, like I just wanted a portion, I could select just a section of the particular audio file and drop that directly into the project without having to drag the whole file. And you could audition loops at the project tempo that will automatically match. So it's a quick overview of Media Bay. But as you kind of get more content and as you get to Steinberg content, all that metadata is populated for you. So it allows you to find kind of all the different components that you own and all the content that you own quickly. Okay. Let's move on. Okay, so it says, hi, Greg. I asked a question a few Hangouts ago. How can I replace the D on duplicate track to 001? Then 002, then 003, 004, etc. So we showed how to replace the D using the project logical editor. So let me just start a new project. So let's say if I duplicate this particular track. Okay, so when we duplicate track, you get this indication of like parenthesis D indicating that it is duplicated. And I think he wants the name to be incremented. So let's see if we could figure this out in the project logical editor. So we want to go to, see if I remember how you, so we'll go to name, contains, and let's see if we can come over here to name. So let's see if this, let's set this to transform. Okay, so let me just, so let's just see if I, let's say media type is equal to track, or maybe container type. Sorry for hitting the mic with my headphones. All right, so let's see if I, so I replace that. So we could replace that. Okay, so I'm just gonna. Okay, so you want to replace the D on the duplicate track to 001, then 002, 003, 004. I'm not sure if there's a. I may have to play with this more, but if we could. So if you want to email me, Jay, just I could play around with it some more. I'm not sure if it's going to automatically take the duplicate, and then I'm not sure if you're duplicating the track multiple times. You want each of those to be edited independently, but I could play with it some more. I just don't want to spend 20 minutes kind of going down a rabbit hole. But if you want to email me to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could play with it some more. But we could at least kind of replace the parenthesis D if you want to. And just seeing some more discussion about the samples that are playing back at the correct, at double the time. Try to, just out of curiosity, if you don't have it, this could be kind of set. So, check over here just out of curiosity when the audio is playing back at different times. Try toggling off some of these settings, like, for, autoplay to the align the beat. And try, see if you have these turned on and try toggling those. But, when I switch sample rates, it doesn't seem to be, an issue on mine. But if it has the metadata in the file itself, also just out of curiosity, like if you could let us know what your tempo is, and if you change the tempo of a project that in your previewing files, if that changes the tempo of the samples that you're doing as well. All right, just going through your comments. Thanks for, excuse me. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, good to see Vinny Sabatino on the Hangout. All right. Okay, just reading through comments. Seeing a lot of discussions on climate in the UK. So see a question, can you run a MIDI file through a guitar pedal? Generally, MIDI files aren't, guitar pedals aren't going to be sent to, guitar pedals don't receive MIDI messages. Some multi-effect processors and some guitar processors may change presets via MIDI program change, but you would need MIDI sent to a device generally, and that device, like a tone module or a VST instrument, could generate audio, and that audio could be sent to a guitar pedal if you wanted to. But generally, for the most part, if a guitar pedal has MIDI in it, there could be some that will have like a little synthesizer chip or something that could respond, but generally for the most part, the guitar pedals are going to respond to audio, and MIDI information is sent to a device, and that device, software or hardware, can generate the audio that could then be processed through a guitar pedal if you want to. All right. Excuse me. All right. So you see someone says, I use Restream by Cubase Reaper hooked into OBS to get their audio. And then, two comments later is like, I can never get Restream to work with OBS, fine with Streamlabs, but I prefer OBS. So yeah. So generally, I've found kind of having, two audio interfaces to work really well for my streaming setup, and I don't have to have plugins installed in different projects all the time to pass audio. So, as you can see from my Hangouts, I'm constantly opening and closing projects. So I don't want every project necessarily to have a plugin, but if it works great for you, that's great. Okay. So question, is there anything to make an impulse response in Cubase by default? I think if we want to, let's go ahead and check something out. So most of the time it's just a very short transient. So let's see if we come here to an effect track and see maybe if there's one in reverence. So if I turn this up, so let's say we turn that all the way down. And let's set my mix to 0%. You could just click on the impulse response here and sample that. So that's it, full up, and let's say I'll bring this all the way down to 0%. So just using the reverence, which is a convolution reverb, you could try to record this as the impulse response generator. So give that a shot. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to make your MIDI output to audio? So let's just find a quick MIDI loop here. Okay, so I have that. We can play this now. So if I want to turn that MIDI information into audio, there's a number of different ways. Probably the easiest way is to just come here, go to edit, and you can choose render in place. Let's go to our render settings. And then I could just choose to render with effects or dry, click render. And then that's now rendered as audio. So you just kind of come right over here. So that's probably the fastest way to turn something into audio that's on the project window. Okay. Okay, just reading through. So good to see Gareth on the Hangout, regular attendee. All right, so I see question. Do you have any techniques for pitch correct and vibrato? So, all right, so let's say if we have, if you have, there's a couple of different ways. So if you have like a Cubase Elements or a lighter version of Cubase, you could have, let me just have that completely squashed. I'll revert this. So there's a real-time plugin called Pitch Correct that you could use like in lighter versions. So, and you could run this as an insert under pitch shift. And here you could pick kind of the key if you wanted to. And at this point, you could, if you wanted to, make it very mechanical sounding and get rid of vibrato. So you could do that and adjust tolerance way up. So if you're looking for that sound, it's a very easy way to do it. So that's one way of working with pitch shifting. And you could also just, in the full Cubase Pro, come directly here to the very audio. And once you're here, we could just kind of can zoom in. And at this point, so if you wanted to just tame vibrato, if you go to the upper center, that will allow you to adjust straighten the curve of vibrato. So at that point, if you wanted to take like a whole phrase of vibrato at this point, you could just. And if you wanted to just have, you could have default controls and also all smart controls. So I'll come here. And if you wanted to not affect like the transition of notes, which can make it sound a bit artificial, we could adjust kind of the vibrato just in the middle portion of a word without affecting kind of the transition into the note and out of the note. So whether you have, you could do stuff for vibrato within the Pitch Correct plugin or just using the very audio as well, where you can get a bit more surgical with it. Okay, so Greg, I need an easy way to move C1 to E1 MIDI notes up one octave for my strumming guitar instrument. Is there an easy way to do that? Often you could do that directly on your controller keyboard, but let's go ahead and I'll just add a MIDI track here. We can show another way. So if you don't have like a transpose on your MIDI keyboard, so I will come in here. Let's go to MIDI insert. And I want this to be, let's say, a MIDI monitor. So I'm going to hit C3 on my controller. And if I wanted that to be set to E3 or E4, I could go to my input transformer and let's put it on local. I'm going to activate the module and we're going to say type is equal to note. And what I want to do is take value 1, which is the pitch, and I want to add, let's say, 4. So now as I do my input transformer, let's go to my MIDI insert again. I hit C, the same C key, and it's going to do E3. And if I want that to be to E4, I could just say add 16. So basically what this is doing is saying take every MIDI note once this is activated and the module is active and add a a major third and an octave. So now when I hit C3, it'll be E4. So that way you could just have that. So again, click on the little squiggly line on the MIDI track. Type is equal to note, which will be the default. Value 1, which on a MIDI note message is going to be pitch. We want to add and choose how many semitones you want to add. And then you could do it entirely within Cubase if your MIDI controller doesn't have a transpose function. Okay. So, and kind of getting back to our snap point, it could also be, and we talked about the snap point in the middle, but let's say if we have like maybe an audio file, we wanted it to snap to the end, you may want to just have it set to snap to events. So we could say, I think like the end of the event could snap. So, you could also try changing the snap type here to the event. So let's say if I have this event way smaller, we'll zoom in here. That, so you could, let's see. So as I adjust here, so I'm grabbing it, let's say by the beginning of the file, and the beginning can snap once we're here. But let's say if I have this set to grid and I grab the end is snapping as well. So I could say make the end snap right to that particular point, and the beginning can fall where it will. So it could be just by where you actually grab the event, by the beginning or the end, of how it reflects to the grid editing as well. Okay. Okay, so question, do I need to buy more Cubase licenses to use a system link connection between two computers? You need to have like two different instances of Cubase, but it doesn't have to be, I think even like Cubase AI, which comes with like a Steinberg interface, or Cubase Elements has VST system link support. So if you just want a simple, like, play video and catch audio out of it, you could just use like a Cubase Elements, I believe, for that. But you could just check. But it would need two separate licenses. We used to have a program called VStack, which would allow you to run VST instruments in the VST link, but that was about 20 years ago. So, but generally you need two separate licenses, but it doesn't have to be a full license. Okay. All right, just reading through comments. All right, so just seeing Jazz Dude had a comment. Note to myself, check out the microtuner and get used to it. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, glad. Yeah, it's a nice little hidden gem. So just see a comment from Millard. Greg, I love her voice. Does Andrea have any commercial releases available on iTunes or Amazon? I'll check. It was a friend of mine, Vince Melmed, I think, wrote songs with her. Vince is kind of like a kind of the quintessential journeyman sideman. He's played with everyone from the Eagles back in the heyday. I think he was on Eagles Live to Roseanne Cash and Bob Dylan and Jimmy Buffett and, a whole bunch of people. So I get a lot of different demo projects from him, and I like kind of tweaking them a little bit. And I just think they're great songs. But I'll find out, see if I get more information on Andrea. It used to be another girl, another singer, like it was a great demo singer that people loved every time I played the tracks as well. So, and she was just like, I think at the time the other girl I know was based in Nashville, but Andrea may be based in California where Vince is living now. So, but I'll see if I can find out some information. Okay, so we have a question. In the Cubase shop, there is a T guitar. Does it accept chords and play these correctly? Can you show a quick promo demo? So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So T guitar is kind of like a really high quality Taylor guitar sample. So we'll add an instrument track here. And I'll just run it inside of Halion Sonic SE because we all have that as Cubase users. All right, so now we'll just come over here so we can play kind of different chords. I may have to move my keyboard range here. So if I play a guitar chord, let's say I just do like a block, E, G, B. So it will voice it correctly as a guitar would, as opposed to like the keyboard voicing that I'm supplying. So if I play an A minor chord, and I may be off on my... let me just transpose my keyboard here. Okay, so let's say I play just an A minor chord. Let me just, sorry, my keyboard is, okay, I had it set transposed incorrectly. So I have just stuff resting on my MIDI controller that I need to tidy up my desk. So we could kind of do voicing chords like that, but there's also, when we get into pattern mode here, you could have, different patterns for each key as well. So you could kind of come over here and say, okay, I want more of a folk pattern, let's say around 120. So I could now just play the chord, and it's going to, each key So each key you could have different style arpeggios. So if you wanted to have more, let's say I just want to come have these particular chord progressions. And it's going to voice it as a guitar player would. So you could really kind of get in and dial around and play around with it. So it's if you want to easily add guitar to your keyboard-based studio, if you're not a guitar player, that's a great way to go. Okay, so just seeing question why Groove Agent doesn't have a retrigger mode. I can't use note repeat without note overlapping. So if you get the full version of Groove Agent, let's take a look at that. So I could come here and assign. So let's say. So if I want, you have a whole kind of performance option here. So when you activate performance, you could have, different pitches here. So let me just see if we could, as I play this particular note here. So I could come over here, let's say to my instrument. And if I wanted to trigger different note repeat patterns, I could just click. So, if you get the full version of Groove Agent, that has kind of like a whole note retrigger section in the performance mode. So I know you didn't indicate Groove Agent SE, but that's one of the things that's in the full version of Groove Agent as well. Okay, so it says, hi, thanks for all the tips. Is it possible to have a shortcut to the waveform zoom slider, the one in the top right corner of the event display? There is a shortcut, and I think this was added in 9.5 or 10. So let me just drop an audio file in. So let's. All right, so it's going to be just again Alt G and H, or Option G and H if you're on Mac. So you can see that as I hold down the keyboard shortcuts, I'm just going to hold down Alt or Option H, that slider moves up and down. So that's how you could do it. Yeah, that was one of the few missing keyboard shortcuts that I complained about a lot. So they added it in probably to make me shut up. Okay. Hi, Greg. When I have automation done on track and want to lift it by 2 dB, when I select all automation or part of it, it's not showing the value, how many dB I'm rising. So just kind of easy way to do this. So let's say I have automation here, and let's say I select the automation. I can just go to the info line here. So let's say I bring all this down here. And I want to bring up these points by 2 dB. So I would select the value here, and it says minus 15 in the info line. So I could just type in those minus 15.3. So I'll say minus 13.3 and hit enter, and then it will just bring it up. Or you could just come here and just use the mouse scroll wheel, and you could increment and decrement the values there and see the value. So select the automation, and then you could just come right here using the mouse scroll wheel to increment, decrement directly and see the values there. Okay. All right. So we see people from Palm Springs, California. Okay. All right. So, question: any suggestions for merging components of different sessions? I have a very large template that evolve over the course of a project. I use track archives. Any are suggestions for evolving sessions? So, if you come over here, just, one of the things, if you have 10.5 is, if you have like a large template, one of the things that's really handy is when you could choose to do an import tracks from project. So let's say if I go to a particular project here, We could open this up, and now I could import, I could choose to select all, or I could deselect all, and I could choose, different components from different sections. I could have this import at the absolute position. I could import it directly into the existing project, or, if you wanted to do a new project, you could start off that way. You could choose to import the events and parts, the channel and inspector settings, or the automation, or any combination thereof. And you could have it automatically convert sample rate and frame rates, and copy all the files to the active project folder. So that was one of the cool things they did in 10.5. Was a lot of the options for the import tracks from project that got beefed up pretty substantially, and can make it a little more practical for working, with templates that evolve over time. Okay, so question, is there a way to pitch bend audio in Cubase? Thanks for another great hangout, Greg, from Gareth. So let's say if I have, let me just find something a little more musical probably. So let's say if I have something like this, and we're playing along. So if I wanted to raise pitch, like from that point on, I could select it. You could go to your direct offline processing and check out the pitch shift. So like a little hidden gem. So if I wanted to pitch up for that selected range, you can set the range of semitones. I think we go 16 semitones. So I'll just kind of come here, and now as we listen to it, if I did it right, you could also do it with time correction. So now, and if you wanted to do only, let's say, from the current pitch up, we could do that as well. So let's say now it's processed that particular file. So that's one way you could kind of do pitch bend of audio in Cubase. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. A new Cubase 10 LE 10.5 user. Is it possible to record directly from my Yamaha PSR 85 keyboard? I have a MIDI dual in-out to USB cable. That model keyboard is old and not on the Cubase list. Predates drivers. So if you're just going, so you would take the USB connection on your computer. And make sure that you have MIDI in and out hooked up correctly to the PSR. So you could definitely record the MIDI to that. If you wanted to use that just as a controller, you could open up a VST instrument in your Cubase 10.5, something kind of like, I think you'll have a Halion Sonic SE. And then once you have that set up, should show up as your MIDI interface. Will show up. So let's come over here. Let's just go to, we have some basic sounds that will come. So let's say I wanted a string patch. So at this point, we could add our string patch, and you'll probably see all MIDI inputs here. So you want to add an instrument track. If you add an instrument track, you could record to software instruments that come with your Cubase LE. If you wanted to record the MIDI data of the PSR itself, you would then add a MIDI track. And when you add the MIDI track, you'd want to make sure that it'll probably default to all MIDI inputs, and that's fine. But you'll see like a USB MIDI out, and this is the MIDI connection that's feeding the Yamaha PSR. So, and as soon as you come over here, you hit record, what it's going to do is record the MIDI out of the PSR. So let's say I'm going to do it with my Halion Sonic SE. So I'll hit record, and then as we do this, it's just going to record that, we're actually, I'll just put this on as well. So at that point, we could record the MIDI information. Now, if it's a MIDI track that's routed to be sent out to the PSR, that would then sound to the PSR. And you may have to connect headphones into the PSR to hear it, or connect it into like a mixer if you wanted to combine it with other devices. Now, if you just wanted to play back, the Halion Sonic SE or the software instruments, you would, as you load the instrument track, so load your instrument, select it, load up a sound, and now at this point, it's just going to play only the Halion Sonic SE. Let me just turn off the... Okay, it's probably this one that's intended. So this is the one here. And now as I play back, it's just going to play back the sounds. So as I hit record here, you hit play and then record, and then just... So this recorded that these MIDI notes were played and held this long, and it's sending the MIDI information to the software instrument that's generating the sound. Or it could send it, if it's a MIDI track, it could send it to the PSR, and then you could have 16 different MIDI channels, and it could play back the sounds on your PSR. So you could definitely use your PSR as long as it has a MIDI in and out. Like, my MIDI controller is probably, I have an old Roland A80 that I still use in my studio, and that's probably, more than 30 years old, and it still works great. So there's no drivers for it, but it just has a MIDI in and out, and your USB driver will work great. So... So I see question, is there a smart EQ to find any instrument without use EQ library? I see, this might be referring to kind of like the EQ chart on a particular, I see some like the low E on on an electric bass is this, the low E on a guitar is this frequency. Probably the best thing that you could do is, as you're playing back, let's say if we're playing back audio here, you may have, let's say if we're just listening to this, you could open up the channel strip and go to the EQ view and see what frequencies are going on. And if you wanted to go to, so here you see the frequencies built in. So I wouldn't worry necessarily about like what ranges the instrument is capable of in a chart. I would worry about kind of what is going on in the EQ. And if you know what the pitch is, something that's really helpful, like if you know that you're in a key of G, you could actually go to the EQ frequency here and just double click and type in like, G3. And that will take that particular EQ to that frequency for you. So you say, okay, I want this to be G1. And then you could just simply adjust that frequency accordingly. So then that's super helpful. If you also go to, look at the frequency EQ plugin, it comes with Cubase Pro. At this point, you could make your adjustments and see the piano keyboard here as you adjust that particular key. So those are a couple of tricks that you could do. Okay, just... Okay, so see some other people helping out with the PSR. So yeah, you could definitely just record that as MIDI information. So okay. I see. Just let me go back, see if this is related. Okay, so I was just seeing, looking for a brass strip preset or EQ preset. So I'm not sure if it's like if you're trying to strip out brass parts from a part. But just kind of look at the frequencies as it's going on. So say if we do this particular part, we could come here and really kind of filter those out. But depending on what notes that it's actually, what notes the brass is playing, you may have to, widen or change that. So there's probably not just one preset that's going to work to strip out brass if that's what you're looking to do. Yeah, and just seeing also Rachel, who asked about hooking up the PSR keyboard. Don't get frustrated. It's getting the older MIDI stuff to work could be could be hard at first, but once you kind of get it, it'll make sense. So be patient and stick with it. Okay, so I'm just seeing maybe this is looking for a brass strip preset or EQ preset, and does a word clock work for that? From David King. So I'm not sure if the word clock comment or question is related to the brass strip, but I think they're pretty unrelated. So. So question, hello, are there videos to buy for learning Cubase? I'm sure there's a lot of videos that are for sale, but if you go to the Steinberg, if you go to the Cubase YouTube channel, I think there's probably more resources there than so that are available. Probably more, I think probably since the pandemic started in March, we probably have, maybe 120 hours of these Google Hangouts that are available. So I think, by far the widest, the deepest amount of tutorials you're going to find are free on YouTube. So I would look there. So I'm just seeing a question I discovered today that subtitles for your Hangouts translate your speech into real-time text. Very convenient for now. I do not disturb the family when watching the Hangout. Yeah, so I think if I go more than 4 hours, which I did on one Hangout, that the automatic closed captioning doesn't work afterwards. So it's helpful for a lot of people who aren't native English speakers, and for myself, who I'm just like the big dumb American who is not good at other languages. So it could be translated to other languages. Okay. Okay, so question, does Cubase help in any way turning sheet music into MIDI? There were some technologies that would allow you to scan a piece of sheet music and turn it into like a MIDI file or a music XML file. I think that by the time many of those you went through and corrected all the errors with them, that it would, even if you couldn't play keyboard, you could almost draw it in with a mouse faster than it would take you to actually do that. So Cubase doesn't have any particular function with that. But there probably are utility programs that could scan a piece of music and export it as a MIDI file or a music XML file that could be directly imported into Cubase. So if you want to do that, so Cubase doesn't have it directly, but other programs may do it. And a lot of notation programs kind of offered the functionality, and we see that over time that they've kind of shied away from it because it may not have been so reliable. Okay. Okay, so just reading through comments. Thanks for all the other people helping everyone. That's great. Okay, so we have a question. Thanks. How to add a Triton and have the patches listed. Sorry, my timeline jumped again. Let me just jump back. Sorry. Okay, just finding where we were. All sorts of questions coming for me to carry through here. So let me just. Okay, so I think I'm kind of back where near I was. Okay, so question, thanks, how to add a Triton and have its patches listed as when using an instrument definition file. Thanks. Okay, so let's see if a Triton is included. If not, there's probably one floating around online. So let's take a look. So we'll go over here to our studio, to more options, to our MIDI device manager. Let me just go ahead and remove a device or two here. So let's install. All right, so we're just going to say Triton. So we click on install device, add Triton. We'll come over here. We tell it what MIDI interface it's connected to. We go to add a MIDI track. We tell this to go out to our Triton. And now we click here where it says off and your program changes. And then you could see all of your different program changes for your Triton by name. So once again, you can start going to studio, to more options, to MIDI device manager, install device, and look through the list. Okay. Okay, just so just see a comment, Greg, have you got some refreshments nearby? These hangouts are a feat of endurance for you. Of course, it's all very much appreciated. Like when I was in high school, I used to move houses piece by piece. So, sitting down talking for 4 hours in front of my computer, doesn't seem that hard in comparison. So I'm sure there's people who have much harder jobs that are, require actual endurance. So, but I appreciate the comment. Hi Greg, can I import my own samples into Backbone? So yeah, you could just kind of drag and drop samples right in. So yes, you can definitely do that. And then once you've done all the processing, you can drag the sample out of Backbone right into, directly into your project window. And then you could take it into Groove Agent or Hallian, etc. Okay. Okay, so Greg, having some e-licenser issues when I open a particular project, I get license expired for Olympus Choir Elements, and they come up disabled. If I close the project and reopen, all is okay. Why? Sometimes the Olympus Choir Elements, if you have a track that's referencing it, you may get that notice. So see if you go into like your Hallian Sonic or Hallian Sonic SE. Sometimes the Olympus Choir Elements was installed with like a Dorico trial. So if you tried like maybe a trial version of Dorico, That could be a component that was left over and after the Dorco trial license expired. But probably if you go into that project, you may notice that there's one track that's probably not sounding. But if you look through them all, there's probably one that's saying, send me out to Olympus Choir Elements, and it's not finding it. And that's probably why you're getting that message. So probably if you just disable the connection to the Olympus Choir Elements or switch it to something else and resave, you'll probably be okay. Okay. All right. So see, Gareth learned about the pitch envelope today. So he learned his new trick. So make sure you give a thumbs up to the Hangout there. All right. So let's move on. Okay. Okay, so I see comment. Thanks for doing the indexes for these, by the way. Yeah, I know it's we cover a lot of topics, and sometimes it's a nuisance to go back shortly after the Hangout and rewatch it again and do the index. But I think that that nuisance for me is a benefit to everyone else, so I'm happy to do it. So okay. Okay, just reading through comments. So, okay, so it's just seeing a comment from Jay about I'll see if I can figure out how to do the incrementing the numbers. I'll see if I can figure it out for you. Here's the comment from Jazz Dude that's kept me employed for a long time. I'm lazy and never read manuals, so I appreciate that. That's my job security. So, all right. Okay, so we have a question. I'm new in Cubase. Can you tell me how to create automation? Because it's very hard to figure out. So if we have a track here, so let's say we'll just listen to like our little synth track. So what I'm going to do is just on the inspector, go to the fader, and we'll see these two buttons at the bottom here, W and R. So W is right, and that will allow you to record the automation as I move a fader or panner or parameter of an EQ. And read allows you to play that back. So when you enable write, read will be turned on. So if I wanted to automate the volume of this particular clip, I'll hit the space bar, and now I'll move the fader. And now as we play it back, that will play back exactly as I move the fader. So go down, then it'll start to go up again. So that way, every time I do that, that will play back the same way. If you don't see the automation, what you do is you select the track and go to the lower left-hand corner. You'll see this little drop-down menu. Click there, and then you can see your automation. But it's not just volume. It could be any parameter in the channel. Plug-in parameters, panning, compressors, whatever. So you could just simply click there, and then you could see and edit the automation as you like. Okay. Okay, so question, can you provide some tips on latency and CPU usage? I'm on 10.5 plus UAD Twin Duo, sometimes stuck. If you have, performance and CPU issues, the one thing to try is to, the first thing I would do is go to your studio menu, to studio setup, and then select your audio interface. It sounds like you have the UAD Twin. Go to the control panel and try to increase the buffer size. The lower the buffer, the more responsive the interface is, and the lower the latency can be while you're tracking. But it also makes the computer work significantly harder. So if you're to a point in your project where you find it, maybe the computer's like the CPU's creeping up, it's maybe you're hearing some pops and crackles, that's a good indication that you need to raise the buffer. So maybe during the initial tracking have the buffer lower, and as you start mixing and having different elements at that point, start increasing the buffer as needed. But I would try that. And that's probably the first thing I would do, and then you'll see kind of a big change with that. All right, so a question from Keith Hirsch. Is there any way, good to see you on the Hangout, Keith, to enter one's own test description in a custom reference impulse preset? So if we come over here, you could go to under Media Bay. So let's take a look here. So we'll go to our Media Bay. Let me see if it's like, if we go to look at, if you wanted to see it in the plugin itself. Or I'll just... All right, so I was just seeing if there's any... So I'm not sure if this is the information that you want to see entered in. So I'm just going to reread the question real quick. So I'm not sure if this could be done by users, and I'll do some more research on this, but you might be able to enter it in the media bay as metadata. Let me just see. If I just load up an impulse. Let me see if I have an impulse file. I might have some. So I don't know of a way to, just seeing if I could find any other impulse files, but I think you could assign this, maybe not to here. I'll do some more research on this, Keith, but I think you could probably add it in the media bay as additional information. Let's see if this shows up in here. Sorry about hitting the microphone with my head again. So let's see if I come over here. So let's say if we go to reverence. So once you're here, you probably could add another field and have kind of, text files for, different. So if you wanted to come here, you click on the plus and have a text field. And we'll just call this info. So now as we click over here, so as you look at it in Media Bay, you could see kind of like a text description based on that. But I don't think that that's going to maybe make it over into here. So, but I can see if I can do some more research, Keith. All right. Okay, so see, question. I'm very new. As of yesterday, I'm using Cubase. Is it possible to quantize my MS-20 with Cubase, syncing up multiple instruments? I have some analog equipment I'd like to use. So generally, if you're syncing up, so any MIDI parts that are recorded. So let's say if I add an instrument track, and and I wanted to just come over here and we'll just solo this. So if I have the data that's, recorded directly in, let's say I'll just turn on. So say if I'm just, if I've recorded something, say as horrible as that, I could come in here and, anything that's recorded in Cubase as MIDI data at this point, you could select and just hit Q for quantize, and that will set kind of the quantize factor. So if I wanted to hit Q again, I could quantize based on eighth notes. So you could do that. But if it's triggering, I know like the MS-20 does a lot of arpeggiator stuff. So anything like that that's captured in a Cubase, you could quantize. But if it's a note that's triggering a sequence or an arpeggio, the original note would have to be kind of on time, or the arpeggiated sequence, which is often what people use an MS-20 for, could be at that point it could actually be off time unless that initial note is off time. So, but yeah, you could quantize anything very easily if it's in Cubase, but you may have to adjust the timing of what the arpeggiator is doing. So. Okay, let's just kind of move on. Okay, so question from Rachel. Anybody got an easy answer to why my YouTube sound dies when I open Cubase? Brand new laptop. I probably messed up sound setting, but I can't play with Cubase while listening to Greg. All right. So this could be complicated. So depending on your audio interface, you want to come over here and go to your studio setup and go to your VST audio system. And then, so if you select your VST audio system, and at this point, you want to click on Release ASIO driver when application is in the background. Depending on if you're running like a Windows laptop, there's probably going to be, and I'm on Mac, so I can't really show this, but but there's probably going to be a control panel, like a little driver for the built-in audio interface on the Mac. So recently, like 6 months ago, I got a new MacBook Pro, and on the Windows side, like I had to, and every audio driver could be found in a different little place, but probably within the audio driver in the control panel, and you may have to dig around. And every company that has the different audio driver is going to be in a slightly different location. But there's going to be a very similar setting for like release ASIO driver in background on the Windows driver as well. So you have to have both of those set up. So if you do that, then you could have Cubase going using your built-in audio, and then have Cubase and have your audio from YouTube and, whatever else you're listening to for any web-based things as well. So, okay. Okay. A question I want to know about routing and Q-Link features. So I'll just get out of this project here. Okay, so let's say I have 16 audio tracks here. So if I wanted these to, to do different routing, like a common thing is maybe to take all of these and route these to different inputs or outputs. So if I wanted like all of these to go to the same output, so you could activate Q-Link here, or hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. And at this point, I could say I want all of these to go to the same destination. So let's say I want these all to go to no bus. So now holding down Alt plus Shift, as I select all of my channels here, we'll see that the routing as I select the different channels will be set to no bus. If I have all of these, and the quick link is based on what is selected. If I have these all chosen here, I can now say, let's route these all to the left output. So just making sure quick link is enabled. Now when I check my routing, they're all set to my left output. And if I want them all to be using the quick link to go to the same destination. So quick link will basically take multiple elements are selected and do the same thing temporarily to them so that they'll do the same function. And that's how you could use quick link with routing. So it says it's probably been asked before, but what's that song? I've heard it in other Hangouts and tutorials too. It's great. I think it's maybe if it's this one. And again, I got to give all credit to Vince Melmed for it. Look him up. He had a solo album out. You can buy the record. He's a wonderful musician, great writer. But I think it may be this one. I think the song's called Beatles or Stones. So he'll allow me to use some of his demos kindly enough. So we'll just kind of pop over here. Let me just revert it if this is the one. So I'm not sure if it was released or not. I've had some of his songs where I've used his demos, and all of a sudden it's a big like country hit. I was like, oh, where did you get that song from? So if it's this one, so I've used this in a number of Hangouts, and again, Vince Melamed, look him up. So he's a wonderful writer and great musician. Okay, so it says, question. Hi, Greg, you're a star. I'm just an Oompa Loompa in a world of Willy Wonkas. All right, but thanks for the kind words. Greetings from London. When I try to open Groove Agent or Halion from desktop shortcut, I get no valid license detected, but it comes up within Cubase. So with, there's a Groove Agent full version and a Halion 6 full version. So those, should work as if you purchase those are separate purchases, kind of add-on purchases. So if you have those licenses, it should work. But when you open Cubase, you get the SE version. So you can think of it as like a starter edition, but you get Groove Agent SE and Halion Sonic SE. So those are licensed with Cubase. So if you try to open up, if you haven't purchased Halion or Groove Agent, you may not be able to open those up, but you may have Groove Agent SE and Halion Sonic SE that come with a program that will open within Cubase. So. Okay. Okay, so question, is there any way to record our audio track with click sound? What you could do if you really wanted to, so it's, I know people that have done it by accident a lot, I remember I had a friend of mine who, had a big dance hit, and it was kind of interesting because he recorded to Cubase click tracks. And I was like, "Oh, I know you did that last track in Cubase." And he's like, "Oh, how'd you know?" I was like, "Oh, I heard the Cubase click track that was recorded." He's like, "Oh yeah, I just did like an internal." He took the output from his audio interface and recorded it. And basically just did a patch to two inputs and re-recorded the track, and he accidentally left a click on. So he's like, yeah, that was kind of an accident, but everyone loved it. So he kind of did it by accident. But if you have one of the things you could do, if you have like the left and right locators, you could go to the project menu and go to the signature track, and you can say render audio click between left and right locators. And now you can just have your click track here rendered as an audio file. And if you wanted to render that and bounce it with another file, you can select both files and bounce them down together and have your click track rendered in. So you could have the click track automatically rendered as an audio file, and then you could bounce that with other tracks if you want to. Okay. Okay, so just see, would love to see Cubase do something similar to CV Tools. I'll pass that along. All right, so let's just, okay. Just moving on. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay. Okay, just reading through questions again. Thanks for all the great discussion. So just saying from Oren, good to see you on a hangout. He would come to our Club Cubase in DC pre-pandemic. Good to hope you're doing well, Oren. Says your search, is there an outline for the questions and answers given to all the Steinberg Google Hangouts? If so, where to go find the outlines? So there's a discussion between Ted and Taylor. So I think Ted, I know, has sent one to me in the past. So I think he's compiling one that hopefully we can use as a resource. So. All right, so see that Rachel got her solution to the audio interface working in the background with YouTube. So we're great. All right. So we see 187 guitar player. Hello, I'm a Cubase beginner. I think everyone here was a Cubase beginner at once. So welcome to the club. And, just be patient and learn it, and think of it like learning a musical instrument. You didn't, looking at your name of 187 guitar player, I think the first time you picked up a guitar, you probably weren't an expert on it. So, but you probably practiced and figured it out, and try to approach learning Cubase in the same way as learning an instrument. Okay. See, comment, Greg's trap album is dropping soon. Yeah, the problem is I'm really good with Cubase, but I'm not a songwriter. So it's kind of the irony of all ironies. So I could take someone else's song and, make it really cool and arrange it and produce it, but I'm not the guy to come up with the initial idea. So, all right. So, yeah, so seeing comments, seems like a great plug-in, the guitar one. Yeah, the T guitar is really, pretty fantastic. So if you get a chance to check it out. Okay. Okay, just going through different comments here. All right. So I see a question. Can I speak German? No, I've worked for a German company for 28 years, and when I go to Germany, I know what Drucken and means, but no, I'm really bad. So I'm quintessentially the stupid dumb American. I just speak a little bit of Spanish and understand Spanish, but I never studied German. Fortunately, all of my colleagues in Germany speak English really well, and I probably learned English terms from them, so they're very good. So, but I always feel bad going to international meetings in Germany or Japan, and everything's being done in English. So, okay, just going through comments. Lots of great discussion. Okay, so I see from Sharon Roberts saying, hello, Greg. Hello, back to you. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we see question from Sharon Robert, how to convert MIDI notes, maybe tap tempo MIDI notes to actual tempo track. Can it be done with Logical Editor? All right, so I think we could do this. Let me just do a new project. I haven't done this in forever. Okay, so I'll just add a MIDI track here. And I'll just do it roughly with a click track here. So I will help us if I put it into record. That would be helpful. All right, so let's say I'm here. I'll place Cubase record. I'll just play some quarter notes in starting now. And I'll kind of speed up. All right, so I have just kind of a range of quarter notes here roughly. And I think if I go to MIDI, to functions, merge tempo from tapping. So I could say we did quarter note tapping. And I'll say begin at bar start and hit OK. And now if we look at our tempo track, there's our tempo track. So you can just kind of tap in MIDI notes, whether it's on the downbeat or just quarter notes or eighth notes. Go to MIDI, At this point, go to Functions and choose Merge Tempo from Tapping. So you don't even have to use the logical editor, Sharon. So. Okay. Just seeing comment from Gareth that Sonic Scoop has a great video of Greg teaching many of the most special features of Cubase in one lesson. Yeah, that's kind of my typical like demonstration for dealers and end users when I do it. So, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. So if you get a chance to check out the Sonic Scoop, that's a pretty good overview. Okay, so just seeing a comment from Fred. Whoa, I didn't know you could type in the note into the EQ like that. Yeah, so it's that's really one of my favorite features, because I would see so many students, always, it's like, I have to cut this frequency, I have to cut 300, I have to boost this. It's like, well, doesn't it matter based on the key of the song you're mixing? And or, oh, I haven't thought of that, So making sure that you're EQing around the frequencies of drums, and I know some drummers that had like 12 toms, and I used to ask them why they would have so many different toms, and it would have them tuned for each of the for each pitch, and they would only play certain toms depending on the key of the song, and making sure like your kick drum is in tune with the piece is also really, little things like that make a big difference. All right, just going through different comments. Again, thanks for all the great questions. If you've learned a new tip, again, please feel free to give a thumbs up to the Hangout. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to, all right. My timeline just jumped. All right, so let me just sneak back. Just when I thought I was getting caught up, realize that I'm just not. All right. Okay, so all right, so I think I'm back to where I was. So I see a question: how can I add plugins on the MIDI insert? So once you go to, let's see if I can get my timeline stop. So when you get to your MIDI inserts, all you have to do is go here. So these are all the available MIDI inserts that come with Cubase. So I'm not sure if I don't think it's a thing where you could, enhance the list or augment the list with other plugins, but most people haven't taken advantage of all these plugins that are available. So I don't think that this is like a format like VST plugins, but they're just kind of little utilities where you could think of it like that. So. Okay. Okay, just reading through comments, a lot of great discussion. Okay, so we have a question at Cubase. Would you recommend a referencing VST plugin, or do you think Cubase contains a complete set of tools needed to utilize a reference track while mixing? I think it's a waste of money, personally. And we've shown this on a couple of Hangouts. We'll do it again for everyone's benefit who hasn't seen it. So when you want to use a reference track, It gets to be tricky because a lot of times we may have plugins on the actual. Let me just find a particular track I'm looking for here. You may have plugins on the master bus. So let me just open up another project here where this is kind of set up. So, having a reference so that you could compare other tracks to make sure that you're not, way too loud, way too soft, or way too bright or dark. So in this example, there's kind of a reference track, and to make the people at YouTube nice and happy, I'm going to just EQ it horribly. So if I have my project here, and got this project from my friend Clay Oswald, who's an amazing musician, producer, engineer. His band Seven Crossing. All right. So what we want to do is to use a reference track. So I will sneak over here, and this is our reference track here. I'm going to set the output of this track to no bus. And what I want to do is go to my Q sends, and I have within my audio connections, I have a Q mix here. So I just call this reference. So this will be our second Q mix. It will be reference. Okay. And you can call it whatever you want. So I'm going to send this particular track to Q mix 2. So this is our reference track. So our reference track isn't being routed through our master fader, because our master fader may have EQs. It may have, different plugins on the master bus. So if we're taking something that's already been mastered and then running it through those processes again, we're not really getting an accurate representation to what's going on in our mix. So what I want to do now is I'm going to play, I'll unmute this, and when I go to my Q mix 2, so what I will do is I can listen to my mix, and then when I click on Q2, this is only this particular track here. So let's say none of the other tracks we're listening to. So as I listen to this as my reference track, and now I could listen to the mix that I'm working on, and then instantly switch to this track. And this is just like a stereo track. Maybe it was imported from a CD. We could, import directly from an audio CD or just a mix down file. So this is our reference track. Again, it's routed to no bus, and it's going to our Q mix. And now I can listen to the actual mix I'm working on versus the Q mix there. So I don't think that there's any need to have a separate tool for a reference. You could take that money and invest it into, I think you're much better investing it into, studio treatment, acoustic treatment, coffee machine than buying a reference utility. So. Okay, just reading through comment. Okay, so I know we had a couple questions that were sent in. Let me get to those before I'm a horrible person. So I know we've done a couple of, so we covered microtuner. Okay, so we had a question sent in. It says I started using Cubase around 1991 as a sequencing MIDI tool in which I connected more than 10 of my modules to my Studio 5, which is then run by my Mac. During the time, I almost exclusively work with MIDI scoring and TV and radio commercials, so it was very convenient since there was a constant changes needed to be done before being finalized. I sort of went on a sabbatical for 15 years and only recently decided to come back to writing, and naturally decided to get the latest Cubase 10 Pro. I suddenly realized I didn't need any of the gears. Cubase literally had everything on board. However, after watching P-Thug's recent video in Cubase, if you haven't seen that, that's the guys from Chromeo. They did a video with P-Thug. It's kind of a cool video, that a really cool vibe to those guys. Love being there for the video shoot. I realized that I might still put all my old gear, especially all those sound modules and Nord keys, to good use. I still have the old Studio 5. Now comes a question. How do I connect all those back to work with the current Cubase 10.10 Pro setup? Connecting the modules and keys via MIDI to the Studio 5 is not a problem. How do I get the iMac running Cubase 10 to run MIDI for the Studio 5? Is the cable that connects to Studio 5 still available? That needs to have a USB or USB-C on the other end, isn't it? Audio-wise, I think it should be easy. So I think the Studio 5 is not going to be able to connect to a contemporary computer. One, it's the drivers aren't going to be working. I don't think there's a physical USB serial or a serial. Was it the old Mac's 9-pin serial to USB? That's available. So if you want to work with all your older analog gear, your outboard synths, investigate a new a new MIDI interface. I think the iConnectivity is what my friends are still using. A lot of external MIDI equipment are still using, and that's what the Chromeo guys are using in their studios, and they could run via USB or Ethernet. So, if you wanted to use that, and I think, and I'm looking at a huge rack in my studio that I just, moved a couple months ago and reset everything up. And I still really haven't turned on any of the modules. And I have 23 synths and, modules and external gear, and I don't really feel the need to miss it. But if you wanted to use that, I think the Studio 5 is going to be a problem, and you're going to need a MIDI interface that will work with the latest operating systems and can connect to your computer. Okay, we got a question at the last Cubase Hangout. You referred to a method of creating MIDI device script using Excel. Can you explain in greater detail how this could be done? So if you have a patch script loaded, a lot of times when people are using patch scripts, this is, I think, for an old Alesis QS6, you could, kind of the problem is it's going to be a text file, but a lot of people use the columns here in the spreadsheet just to kind of increment different values for the program change and the bank change and MSB, LSB, and kind of use a formula to increment and decrement those and cut, copy, and paste the the patch names in, and then export that as a text file. So it's just an easier way so that you don't necessarily have to increment each of these different patch name scripts for, the LSB, MSB values. So that's really, I'm pretty dumb with Excel, but I know that's how a lot of people kind of use it as. Okay, so we kind of covered side chaining a bit. All right, so let's move back to our live discussion. Thanks for all the great questions. Again, if you want to send questions in advance, especially if it's something a little more involved, I could sometimes create a project to save time so we get through more questions. Okay. So it says, hi, Greg, I lose my apps from loops and samples from Cubase. Thank you. So if you lost your loops and samples from Cubase, just go into the media bay. So under media, go to media bay, and then just, come over here and try to just, do a rescan. So you could go to this computer and go to Macintosh HD and just right click and click on rescan disk, and that will probably do the trick for you. You could also go into the library manager, which we looked at earlier, and that could restore kind of lost content. All right, let's move on. Okay. Okay, so it says, "Hi Greg. Speaking of sheet music and score editor, is the score editor at a level fairly currently accurate for scoring simple to intermediate orchestral music at this point, or is Dorco necessary?" You could definitely use either program for that. There's lots of people that do all of their all their scoring in Cubase. I had a friend who did a Broadway show and, did all the scoring for it in Cubase, and, no one had a problem with it at all. So, you could definitely, do it in Cubase. But, Dorco is also, a very specialized tool for that. So either one can work for you. Dorco will be more extensive and is it really a purpose built tool for that. But you could do a lot of scoring with Cubase as well. Okay. So a question, can you give us use cases of preference MIDI filter? Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at the MIDI filter preferences. Okay, so there could be a lot of different things that could be filtered out that are useful. Sometimes, like older keyboards, I'm looking at my Roland JD800. As anytime you moved like a slider, would send a MIDI sysx, and that could completely clog the MIDI data stream. So that way you could filter, sysx out. I was helping someone who's the other day their keyboard controller every time they moved the mod wheel, because the controller was just physically 32 years old, the pitch bend would move slightly. So, we could just come over here and say filter out pitch bend information or filter out aftertouch. It used to be, I think, people, I think the Roland D50 was pretty notorious for anytime people would play, it would spit out a lot of aftertouch information. Kind of unexpectedly or unknowingly to the person that was playing it, and that could clog up the whole MIDI data stream when that was kind of very critical. So you could filter out aftertouch or different polyphonic pressure or notes. So those are a couple of things that you could do with the MIDI filters. Okay, we'll go a couple more minutes and then we'll wrap up in just a couple minutes. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, just reading through. Okay, so I see question. Hi, Greg. When I preview loops in Media Bay, after a couple loops in Media Bay, start preview from bar 2 or 3, not from beginning of loop. How to adjust for that? Okay, so let's come over here to the Media Bay, and we're auditioning different loops. So look just to the right here. There is this thing that says align beats to project. So if you're playing a project, check these little settings right here. And I think one of these, like you may have this second one on, and that could be causing it to start at different locations. Okay, so question, is there a way to detect the pitch of a sample loaded in the audio editor? I want to tweak the pitch of a kick drum to match the bass line. How would I go about detecting the pitch to fix it? Okay, so I'll come here. We could drop this in. And let me just see. I haven't tried this, but if we go to... Okay, so it'll give you kind of the frequency there, but if we just take this and I'll go into, so I'll double click here and let's go to Vary Audio and have it do its analysis. And we can see that it's indicating this pitch here. So so right at this point, this will probably be your pitch. So just do it in Vary Audio and that could tell you the pitch is going to be G0. And then if you wanted to take this particular file, you can go to the sampler track and drop in. So let's say you just wanted to start. So you could just kind of pick your different start and end time. So let's say if I just want to take just this one. And once you kind of know what the pitch is of this particular file, I'll just bounce the selection here, make it a little easier to determine, replace the events. So as soon as we go to the Vary Audio, we could just drop it in. So let's say G0. So I will just take that particular element there, go to the sampler control, and we can set the root key here to G0 and hit enter. And then you could just kind of play just like that. So use the Vary Audio to do, to determine the pitch of the kick drum. Okay, so question, I use Yamaha Genos. My question is there compatibility between Microtuner Cubase and Yamaha keyboard if I use Microtuner Cubase to send a signal data to Genos? I don't believe that the Genos is going to be have that capability, but it may have. I know it's used for a lot of kind of different ethnic Middle Eastern parts, so it may have its own internal tuning scales and temperaments. But I don't think it's going to support it over MIDI, and it's just a limitation of the Genos. So I don't think it's going to support that. I could be mistaken, but I don't think it is. And, maybe as MIDI 2.0 becomes more prevalent, we might see more of that coming. So... Okay, so it says, I wonder maybe if you can answer, Greg, how far in between was Absolute 3 from 4? Is there an Absolute 5 about to happen? Can we expect T Guitar Micro and Backbone Micro and Absolute 5 perhaps? I haven't heard of any plans for Absolute 5. I don't remember the length between 3 and 4. T Guitar is actually done by a different company. I think it's done by Acoustic Instruments. So, we distribute it through our online shop, on the Halion platform, but we don't actually make it. So we may not see that as like a Steinberg bundle since it's not actually a Steinberg branded product. And I think with Backbone just being released that they're not going to necessarily, give it away. So I think it's a safe investment to go, directly, and if you're looking to do like drum resynthesis that you're not going to regret, investing into Backbone and have it be bundled with something, very soon. So I think it's a great investment to work with. So we've gone about 3 hours and 56 minutes. I have another meeting I have to get on to, and I'm gonna go hang out with my son for a little bit. He's been very patient during the hangout. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions today. I hope that everyone has learned a couple of tips and tricks. Let your friends know if you've learned something. Invite a friend to check out the Hangouts. And Taylor and Ted, if you want to get all that information of all the topics that we covered in kind of a searchable format. I know Ted had sent some other stuff over, but that'd be a wonderful resource that we could share with people. I think that would be super helpful. I want everyone to please stay safe and healthy, and we'll be doing it again on Friday at the same time. So look for an announcement for that. And again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do that. And you could, be notified of the different Hangouts and, give a thumbs up. And we'll see you guys on Friday. Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone has learned something helpful to them. So everyone have a great day, and we'll see you in a couple days. Take care.